sleep matters.
The first men reach Westeros. The first men arrived in Westeros approximately 12,000 years before the events of Game of Thrones. They were a race of tall, strong, bronze-wielding warriors who crossed the narrow sea from Essos using simple boats made of wood and animal hides. Their journey was driven by a need for land and resources, and they sought a new home on the western continent. When they first landed on the eastern coasts of Westeros, they found a land of dense forests, wide rivers, and vast, untamed wilderness. This land was already inhabited by the Children of the Forest, a mysterious, ancient race of small, humanoid beings with deep connections to nature and magic. The Children of the Forest were not warriors. They were mystics and seers who lived in harmony with the land. They had deep green eyes, dark skin, and were known for their ability to use magic. Their most sacred sites were the Weirwood groves, ancient forests filled with white-barked trees with leaves like red hands and faces carved into their trunks. These trees were sacred to the children, serving as a connection to their gods, the old gods of the forest. The arrival of the first men was not a peaceful event. As the first men spread across Westeros, they cleared forests to create farmland, hunted the animals of the land, and built villages. Their bronze weapons and tools gave them an advantage in terms of technology, making them powerful settlers. But their aggressive expansion led to conflict with the Children of the Forest, who saw their sacred groves being destroyed and their ancient lands being taken. The Children of the Forest tried to fight back using their ancient magic. They called upon the natural world to defend them, causing rivers to flood, forests to grow wild, and animals to turn against the first men. They even used their most powerful weapon, dragonglass, which was a type of volcanic glass that was deadly to the first men. The children also used weirwoods to see across the land, whispering to each other through the ancient network of trees. However, the first men were relentless. Their bronze swords cut down the forests, and their fires burned the sacred groves. Villages of the Children of the Forest were destroyed, and many of their sacred sites were lost. The war between the first men and the Children of the Forest lasted for generations. But despite their magic, the children were outnumbered and overpowered by the physically stronger and technologically superior first men. The war caused great suffering on both sides. Realizing that the conflict would destroy both their races, the leaders of the first men and the Children of the Forest came together to negotiate a peace agreement. This peace became known as the Pact. It was signed on the Isle of Faces, a sacred island in the center of the God's Eye Lake. Here, beneath the Weirwood trees, the first men agreed to stop their expansion into the forests and to respect the sacred groves of the children. In return, the children allowed the first men to settle the open lands, the plains, and the hills. The pact marked the end of the open conflict between the two races. Over time, the first men adopted many of the traditions of the Children of the Forest, including the worship of the old gods. The weirwood trees, with their sorrowful faces carved into the trunks, became sacred to the first men as well. The ancient groves of the Children of the Forest were left untouched, becoming places of quiet reverence. The first men established their kingdoms, building their villages into towns and their towns into stone fortresses. They became the dominant race in Westeros, spreading their culture and language across the continent, but they never forgot the Children of the Forest. The Pact was remembered in their stories, and the ancient Weirwoods became silent witnesses to this peace. Over time, the children of the forest became fewer. They withdrew into the deep forests, into the shadowed places of the world, their whispers fading into legend. But the Weirwoods remained, their sorrowful faces watching, their red leaves whispering in the wind. The first men spoke of the old gods, but they did not know that these gods were the spirits that the children of the forest had once worshipped. As the first men built their kingdoms, they also built great halls and keeps, and one of these became Winterfell, the ancient seat of House Stark. The Starks claimed descent from the first men, and they continued to worship the old gods in their sacred Weirwood grove, a silent reminder of the ancient pact. The first men spread across Westeros, forming the first true kingdoms of the continent. The Kingdom of the North became the largest and most powerful of these kingdoms, its lords known for their fierce loyalty and their reverence for the old gods. The Kingdom of the Riverlands, the Kingdom of the Vale, the Kingdom of the Stormlands, the Kingdom of the Reach, the Kingdom of the Westerlands, and the Kingdom of Dorne all grew from the settlements of the first men. These early kingdoms were ruled by warlords and chieftains who claimed their lands through strength and conquest. The first men brought with them the concept of trial by combat, a tradition that would remain in Westeros for thousands of years. They also brought their ancient runes, a script they used to carve messages and mark their graves. The children of the forest were not forgotten, but they became a distant memory. Their songs faded, their whispers grew silent, and their magic became a legend. But they were not gone. In the shadowed forests, in the hidden caves, in the silent groves of the Weirwoods, they watched. The Pact was a promise, but it was also a memory of a world that was fading. And the first men, though they had become the rulers of Westeros, were not the last to dream of this land. For across the sea, in the distant lands of Valyria, another race watched the western lands. And with them came a new power, a new threat, the dragons. The arrival of the first men in Westeros marked the beginning of a new era. It transformed the land from a place of ancient magic and shadows into a world of kingdoms and wars. The first men became the foundation of Westerosi culture, their traditions and beliefs shaping the continent for thousands of years. But their arrival also set the stage for future conflicts, for the magic of the children of the forest did not vanish, and the Weirwoods, with their sorrowful faces, stood as silent witnesses to the history that unfolded beneath their boughs. The story of Westeros was just beginning. The Weirwood Pact of the Children. The Weirwood Pact of the Children is a significant event in the history of Westeros, taking place approximately 10,000 years before the events of Game of Thrones. This agreement marked the end of a long and destructive conflict between the first men and the children of the forest. The first men were a race of tall, strong warriors who migrated to Westeros from Essos using simple wooden boats. They arrived around 12,000 years ago, bringing with them bronze weapons, simple farming techniques, and a desire to claim land. As they spread across Westeros, they began clearing forests, building villages, and hunting the animals that roamed the land. This aggressive expansion brought them into direct conflict with the children of the forest, the native inhabitants of Westeros. The children of the forest were a small, ancient race of beings who lived in harmony with the land. They were deeply connected to nature and practiced a form of magic known as green magic. They worshipped the old gods of the forest, whose presence was said to be strongest in the Weirwood trees, ancient, white-barked trees with red leaves and faces carved into their trunks. These trees were sacred to the children, serving as a link to their gods and a source of their magical power. The conflict between the first men and the children of the forest was long and brutal. The first men, with their bronze weapons and superior numbers, cleared large areas of forest to build their villages and farmlands. The children of the forest fought back using their magic, which allowed them to manipulate nature. They caused rivers to flood, trees to grow wild, and animals to turn against the first men. They also wielded dragon glass, a volcanic glass that was highly effective against the first men. The war led to great suffering on both sides. Villages were burned, sacred groves were destroyed, and countless lives were lost. The children of the forest, despite their magic, were outnumbered and overpowered by the first men. Their sacred forests were burned, and many of their ancient groves were lost. Recognizing that continued conflict would only lead to the destruction of both races, the leaders of the first men and the children of the forest came together to negotiate a peace agreement. This peace was known as the Weirwood Pact. It was signed on the Isle of Faces, a sacred island in the center of the God's Eye Lake. The island was home to a grove of weirwood trees, whose faces were carved by the children of the forest as a mark of their sorrow and as a witness to the agreement. The terms of the Weirwood Pact were clear. The first men agreed to cease their expansion into the forests. They promised to respect the sacred groves of the children of the forest and to leave the weirwood trees untouched. In return, the children of the forest allowed the first men to settle the open lands, the plains, the hills, and the river valleys. The agreement created a boundary between the two races, allowing them to coexist peacefully. The signing of the Weirwood Pact marked the end of the war and the beginning of a period of relative peace. The first men adopted many of the traditions of the children of the forest, including the worship of the old gods. The weirwood trees became sacred to the first men, who built groves around them in their villages and keeps. These sacred groves became places of prayer and reflection, where the first men would offer their thanks to the old gods and seek their guidance. The children of the forest, whose numbers were greatly diminished by the war, withdrew to the deep forests and shadowed valleys of Westeros. They lived in secret, their magic fading, their songs a quiet whisper beneath the rustling leaves. Over time they became a legend, their once mighty presence reduced to stories told beside the fire. The Weirwood Pact had a lasting impact on Westeros. It established a foundation of coexistence between the first men and the children of the forest. It ensured that the sacred groves would be preserved, that the weirwood trees would stand as silent witnesses to the history of the land. The first men carried the memory of the pact with them, and their descendants, the Starks of Winterfell, would become the most prominent worshippers of the old gods. Maintaining their sacred weirwood grove at the heart of their ancestral seat, the pact also had a significant impact on the cultural and religious practices of the first men. By adopting the worship of the old gods, they established a spiritual connection to the land and the weirwood trees. This religious tradition would continue for thousands of years, even as new cultures and religions emerged in Westeros. The pact also served as a reminder of the ancient magic that still lingered in the world. The weirwood trees, with their sorrowful faces and red leaves, were more than just trees. They were a connection to the magic of the children of the forest, a silent witness to the history of Westeros. As the centuries passed, the children of the forest continued to fade, their magic growing weaker, their presence becoming a distant memory. But the Weirwoods remained, their faces watching, their roots whispering with the memory of the Pact. The Weirwood Pact was not merely an agreement. It was a turning point in the history of Westeros. It transformed a brutal conflict into a lasting peace. It preserved the sacred groves of the children of the forest, allowing their magic to endure even as their people faded. It shaped the culture and religion of the first men, creating a tradition of reverence for the old gods that would continue for thousands of years. It was a memory carved into the ancient Weirwood trees, a promise that even the most bitter enemies could find peace. The Isle of Faces, where the pact was signed, remained a sacred place, a grove of weirwood trees whose faces were carved with ancient sorrow. It was said that the Green Men, mysterious guardians of the Weirwoods, still watched over the island, ensuring that the memory of the pact would never be forgotten. The Weirwood Pact of the Children is remembered as one of the most significant events in the history of Westeros. It marked the end of a devastating conflict and the beginning of a period of coexistence between two very different races. It transformed the first men, shaping their culture, their religion, and their connection to the land. And it left a lasting mark on Westeros, a mark carved into the ancient Weirwood trees, whose sorrowful faces stand as silent witnesses to the history of the world. The Long Night and the Endless Darkness. The Long Night is one of the most significant and catastrophic events in the history of Westeros, taking place approximately 8,000 years before the events of Game of Thrones. It was a period of extreme winter and darkness that lasted for an entire generation. During this time, the world was plunged into a state of perpetual night, with the sun vanishing from the sky, leaving the land shrouded in darkness. The cause of the Long Night is not fully understood, but it is believed to have been a natural phenomenon of catastrophic proportions, possibly involving volcanic eruptions, an impact event, or a shift in climate. The darkness that covered the world was not only an absence of sunlight, but a cold, deadly shadow that seemed to suck the warmth from the land. Crops withered in the frozen earth, rivers turned to ice, and entire villages were buried beneath the snow. The long winter brought famine, death, and despair to the people of Westeros and beyond. But the darkness was not only a natural disaster, it was also the time when the White Walkers first appeared. These were creatures of ice and death, tall, silent beings with pale skin and eyes that burned with a cold blue light. They were led by the Night King, a figure whose origins are shrouded in mystery. According to legend, the Night King was once a mortal man, a warrior of the first men, who was captured by the children of the forest and transformed into a creature of ice using dark magic. This was part of a desperate attempt by the children of the forest to create a weapon against the first men, who were destroying their sacred forests and threatening their existence. But the Night King did not remain under their control. He became something far more dangerous, a creature of darkness and death who could raise the dead to serve as his silent army. The White Walkers swept across the land, bringing death and destruction. Villages vanished beneath the snow, their people rising again as whites, the mindless servants of the Night King. The first men fought back with their bronze swords and iron shields, but they were powerless against the cold touch of the White Walkers. The children of the forest, whose magic had created the Night King, now found themselves fighting for their survival. They called upon the ancient magic of the Weirwoods, whispering their spells beneath the sorrowful faces of the sacred trees, but even their magic was fading. The world seemed on the brink of destruction, with the darkness spreading and the dead marching. But even in this darkness, there was a spark of hope. The stories speak of the last hero, a legendary figure who rose to challenge the White Walkers. According to legend, the last hero was a young warrior who ventured into the frozen north, seeking the children of the forest in the hope of finding a way to stop the darkness. His companions died one by one, falling to the cold, the shadows, and the silent dead. But the last hero did not give up. He reached the children of the forest, who used their ancient magic to help him fight back against the White Walkers. Some stories say that they gave him a weapon, a sword made of dragon glass, which was deadly to the White Walkers. Others speak of a great fire that the children used to drive back the darkness. The last hero's struggle became a legend, but it also marked the beginning of the end for the Long Night. The first men and the children of the forest joined forces, using their combined strength to push back the White Walkers. Together they built the wall, a vast barrier of ice and stone stretching from one side of Westeros to the other. The wall was more than just a physical barrier. It was a magical shield, woven with ancient spells by the children of the forest, designed to keep the White Walkers at bay. The Night's Watch was founded, a brotherhood of warriors who swore to guard the wall and protect the realm from the darkness beyond. They were not kings or lords. They were outcasts, exiles, and criminals who took an oath to stand as the last line of defense against the cold and the dead. The wall became a symbol of safety, a promise that the darkness would not pass. The end of the Long Night was marked by the return of the sun, the melting of the ice, and the retreat of the White Walkers into the far north beyond the wall. The darkness faded, and the world began to heal, but the memory of the Long Night remained. The first men spoke of it in whispers, telling stories of the cold darkness that devoured the land, of the dead who walked in silence. The children of the forest, whose numbers were greatly diminished, withdrew into the shadowed forests, their magic fading, their songs becoming a quiet whisper. The wall stood as a silent sentinel against the darkness, a reminder of the terrible threat that once nearly destroyed the world. The Long Night became a legend, a tale whispered beside the fire, a warning of the darkness that always waited in the north. But the story was not forgotten. The ancient prophecies spoke of the prince that was promised, a hero who would be born again to fight against the darkness when it returned. This prophecy would echo down through the ages, becoming part of the faith of R'hllor, the Lord of Light, whose followers believed in an eternal struggle between light and darkness. In the north, the Starks of Winterfell, who claimed descent from the first men, remembered the Long Night with their ancient words. Winter is coming. These words were not merely a saying. They were a warning, a promise that the darkness would always return. The Long Night had a profound impact on the history of Westeros. It created the Wall and the Night's Watch, two institutions that would stand for thousands of years. It transformed the children of the forest from a powerful race of mystics into a shadowed memory. It left a mark on the first men, who became the ancestors of many of the great houses of Westeros, including the Starks, who would continue to honor the old gods and guard the north. It created a fear of winter and darkness that would become part of the culture of Westeros, a fear that echoed through the centuries. Even as new kingdoms rose and fell, even as dragons swept across the sky and kings fought for crowns, the memory of the Long Night remained. and in the far north, beyond the wall, the darkness waited. The White Walkers did not vanish. They were driven back, but they did not die. The Night King remained, a silent shadow in the frozen mists, his cold blue eyes watching from the darkness. The long night was not just a story, it was a warning, a promise that the darkness would one day return. The wall stood, the Night's Watch kept their vigil, and the stories of the long night were told not just as history, but as a reminder of the darkness that always waits beyond the light. The Night King's Secret Pact. Approximately 8,000 years ago, during the Age of Heroes, the world of Westeros was a land of ancient magic, myth, and emerging civilizations. It was during this time that a cataclysmic conflict erupted between the first men, who had migrated to Westeros from Essos, and the children of the forest, the original inhabitants of the land. The first men, armed with bronze weapons, cleared forests, built settlements, and spread across Westeros. This expansion led to direct conflict with the children of the forest, who saw the destruction of their sacred Weirwood trees as an attack on their ancient faith. The children, who possessed deep magical knowledge, attempted to use their powers to stop the first men, but their efforts only slowed the advance. In a desperate attempt to defend themselves against the relentless advance of the first men, the children of the forest resorted to a dangerous form of magic. They captured a human male, tied him to a weirwood tree, and plunged a dragonglass dagger into his heart. This magical ritual transformed the man into the first of the White Walkers, a creature of ice and death. This transformed being would come to be known as the Night King. The children had intended to create a weapon capable of defending them from the first men, but their creation soon became a threat to all of Westeros. The Night King and the White Walkers turned against their creators, leading to a period of darkness and terror known as the Long Night. The White Walkers were not just mindless monsters. They were a force with a purpose, a cold and calculating enemy led by the Night King. Under his command, the White Walkers raised the dead as whites, creating an unstoppable army that marched south, leaving a trail of frozen death in their wake. It is in this context that the concept of the Night King's secret pact emerges. According to certain theories and legends, the Night King may have forged a secret pact with other powerful figures in Westeros, or even with the first men themselves. Some speculate that the Night King, as a former human, may have retained a degree of intelligence and even a sense of strategy. This would explain the patterns of his movements and his focus on certain locations, such as Winterfell. One popular theory suggests that the Night King's pact was with the Starks of Winterfell. According to this idea, the phrase, "there must always be a Stark in Winterfell," may be connected to an ancient agreement between the Night King and the Stark family. The Starks, descended from the first men, may have been the only force capable of maintaining a balance between the living and the dead. Another theory proposes that the Night King's pact was with the children of the forest themselves. In this version of the story, the children may have tried to negotiate with the Night King after realizing the danger of their creation. However, such a pact would have been fragile and eventually broken, leading to the Night King's determination to destroy all life in Westeros. The Night King's long dormancy in the land of always winter and his eventual reawakening could be seen as part of this ancient agreement. If he had been bound to the far north as part of a truce or curse, his return would signal that the terms of the pact had been broken. This theory is supported by the fact that the wall was not just a physical barrier, but was also imbued with ancient magic. This magic may have been part of a greater enchantment meant to keep the Night King and his army from advancing south. For thousands of years, the Night King and his White Walkers remained in the far north, becoming little more than legend to the people of Westeros. The Night's Watch was established to guard the wall, but few believed that the White Walkers were real. It was only during the events of Game of Thrones that the Night King re-emerged, beginning his march south with an army of the dead. His method of creating new White Walkers by transforming human infants, as seen in Craster's Keep, suggested that he was not merely a mindless force, but a leader with a plan. His ability to raise the dead and control them as whites made him one of the most dangerous threats in Westerosi history. The idea of a secret pact also extends to his final confrontation with Bran Stark, the three-eyed raven. Some fans speculate that the Night King's focus on Bran was not just a desire to destroy the world's memory, but was part of a deeper, ancient connection between them. Bran, as the three-eyed raven, was the living embodiment of the world's history and magic. By eliminating Bran, the Night King could have erased all record of the past, allowing him to rewrite the world in his own image. In the Battle of Winterfell, the Night King's campaign reached its climax. As he advanced on Bran, it seemed that his ancient plan would finally succeed. However, Arya Stark intervened, using a Valyrian steel dagger to kill the Night King. The destruction of the Night King led to the immediate disintegration of the White Walkers and the army of whites. With his death, the long night was averted once more, and the ancient threat of the White Walkers was finally ended. Yet the mystery of the Night King's origins and his possible secret pact remains one of the most debated topics among fans of Game of Thrones. Was he merely a weapon that turned against his creators? Or was he a being with a complex plan, guided by an ancient agreement? Did the Starks, the Children of the Forest, or other ancient forces have a role in his rise and fall? These questions continue to spark debate, leaving room for interpretation and speculation. In the end, the Night King's secret pact is a concept that explores the hidden depths of Westerosi history, the fragile balance between life and death, and the possibility that the greatest threat may have been a consequence of an ancient choice. The Wall is built. The Wall is one of the most iconic structures in the history of Westeros, a massive fortification of ice that stretches for hundreds of miles along the northern border of the Seven Kingdoms. Its origins date back thousands of years to a time known as the Age of Heroes, following the end of the Long Night, a catastrophic period of darkness and freezing cold that nearly brought humanity to extinction. The Wall was built to serve as a barrier, a final line of defense against the ancient threat of the White Walkers. According to ancient records, the Wall was constructed under the leadership of Brandon the Builder, a legendary figure who was the founder of House Stark. Brandon was a skilled architect and builder, and his name is associated with many of the great fortifications of Westeros, including Winterfell. It is said that he built the Wall with the help of the Children of the Forest, a mystical race of beings who possessed powerful magic, and the giants, enormous creatures who lived in the far north. The Wall was built using massive blocks of ice, and it was reinforced with magic, making it nearly impossible to breach. It stood over 700 feet tall and stretched for more than 300 miles, from the Shadow Tower in the west to Eastwatch by the Sea in the east. At its base, the Wall was wide enough to support a road, and it was topped with a walkway that allowed the Night's Watch, the sworn brotherhood that guarded the wall, to patrol its length. The purpose of the wall was to protect the realms of men from the dangers that lurked in the lands of Always Winter, the frozen and desolate region beyond the wall. This included the White Walkers, supernatural beings with pale skin and glowing blue eyes who were capable of raising the dead to serve them as whites. The Night's Watch was established to guard the wall and ensure that the darkness of the long night would never return. The Night's Watch was an order of men who took a sacred oath to serve as the guardians of the wall. Members of the Night's Watch were known as Black Brothers, and they came from all walks of life. Some were noblemen who had chosen a life of duty, while others were criminals who were given the choice between execution or taking the black. Once a man took the oath, he was expected to forsake all titles, lands, and family ties. His only loyalty was to the Night's Watch. Over the centuries, the wall became a symbol of the struggle between light and darkness, civilization and chaos. It stood as a reminder of the sacrifices made by those who had fought in the battle for the dawn, the final conflict between the living and the White Walkers that had brought an end to the long night. But as time passed, the true history of the wall and the threat it was meant to defend against became shrouded in legend. Many in the southern kingdoms of Westeros came to see the Night's Watch as a relic, a place for outcasts and criminals, rather than a noble order of protectors. The wall was divided into 19 castles, although only 3 remained manned in the time of the Game of Thrones series. These were Castle Black, the Shadow Tower, and Eastwatch by the Sea. Castle Black served as the primary headquarters of the Night's Watch and was home to the Lord Commander, the leader of the Order. Eastwatch by the Sea was responsible for guarding the eastern coast, while the Shadow Tower guarded the western end of the wall. Despite its imposing size and magical fortifications, the wall was not an impenetrable barrier. Over the centuries, wildlings, also known as free folk, attempted to cross the wall in search of the warmer lands of the south. Some succeeded, while others were driven back by the Night's Watch. The wall was also tested by the legendary King Beyond the Wall, a title claimed by various wildling leaders who sought to unite the free folk and lead them against the southern kingdoms. The wall's importance was dramatically reaffirmed in the events of the Game of Thrones series, when the White Walkers returned, leading an army of the dead against the living. In the final season of the series, the wall was breached by the Night King, the leader of the White Walkers, who used the undead dragon Viserion to destroy a section of the wall at Eastwatch by the Sea. This event marked the beginning of the final battle between the living and the dead. The wall is not just a physical barrier of ice and stone. It is a symbol of the sacrifices made to protect the realms of men from the darkness beyond. It is a reminder that the ancient threats of the long night are never truly gone, but merely waiting beyond the frozen horizon. The Night's Watch and the Cold Oath. The Night's Watch is a military order established during the Age of Heroes in Westeros, approximately 8,000 years before the events of Game of Thrones. It was created as a direct response to the threat of the White Walkers and the Long Night, a catastrophic period of darkness and extreme winter that nearly destroyed the world. The primary purpose of the Night's Watch was to guard the wall, a massive structure of ice and stone that stretches 300 miles across the northern border of Westeros. The wall was constructed using a combination of ice, stone, and ancient magic, and it served as a barrier to prevent the White Walkers and other dangers from the far north from entering the realms of men. The Night's Watch was initially composed of warriors who were chosen for their bravery and skill. They were men who volunteered to take on the sacred duty of defending the wall and protecting Westeros from the threats beyond. Over time, however, the Night's Watch became a place of exile for criminals, outcasts, and men with no other place in society. These men were given a choice: face execution or take the black and join the Night's Watch. Once they took the oath, they were stripped of their former lives. They gave up their family names, their lands, their titles, and their pasts. They swore to live and die at their post, to defend the wall without seeking personal glory or gain. The oath of the Night's Watch is a solemn promise, a binding vow that all members must take before joining the order. It is spoken in the presence of a weirwood tree, a sacred tree with white bark and red leaves, which is a symbol of the old gods of the forest. The oath is as follows: Night gathers, and now my watch begins. It shall not end until my death. I shall take no wife, hold no lands, father no children. I shall wear no crowns and win no glory. I shall live and die at my post. I am the sword in the darkness. I am the watcher on the walls. I am the shield that guards the realms of men. I pledge my life and honor to the Night's Watch for this night and all the nights to come. This oath emphasizes the complete dedication of the Brothers of the Night's Watch to their duty. By taking this oath, they abandon all personal ambitions and commit themselves entirely to defending the wall. The Night's Watch is divided into three main orders. The Rangers are the soldiers who patrol the lands beyond the wall, exploring the frozen wilderness and facing the dangers that lurk there. They are the most active members of the Watch, and they are led by the First Ranger. The Builders are responsible for maintaining the wall and the various castles along its length. They repair the ice, reinforce the structures, and ensure that the wall remains strong and secure. The Stewards are tasked with supporting the Night's Watch through a variety of duties, including cooking, cleaning, hunting, and managing supplies. They also serve the Lord Commander, the highest-ranking officer of the Night's Watch, who is elected by the Brothers of the Watch in a democratic vote. The Night's Watch is headquartered at Castle Black, a large fortress located at the base of the wall. Castle Black is one of 19 castles built along the wall, but only 3 of these castles are actively manned. In addition to Castle Black, the Shadow Tower and East Watch by the Sea are the other 2 active fortresses. The Shadow Tower is located at the western end of the wall, while East Watch by the Sea is located at the eastern end, overlooking the Shivering Sea. The wall itself is a monumental structure, standing over 700 feet tall and stretching for 300 miles across the northern border of Westeros. It is said to have been built by Bran the Builder, a legendary figure of the Age of Heroes, with the help of the Children of the Forest and the Giants. The wall is not only a physical barrier, but also a magical one, with ancient spells woven into its foundations to prevent the passage of the White Walkers. The Night's Watch is led by the Lord Commander, who is elected by the Brothers of the Watch. The Lord Commander is responsible for overseeing the defense of the wall, managing the Watch's resources, and maintaining discipline among the Brothers. Some of the most notable Lord Commanders in the history of the Night's Watch include Jorah Mormont, who led the Watch during the War of the Five Kings, and Jon Snow, who became Lord Commander at a young age and introduced several reforms that challenged the traditional order of the Watch. The Brothers of the Night's Watch come from all walks of life. Some are noblemen who chose to take the black to escape family conflicts or avoid disgrace. Others are criminals who were given a choice between execution and joining the Watch. There are also commoners who join the Watch in search of purpose, adventure, or redemption. Despite their diverse backgrounds, all members of the Night's Watch are equal once they take the oath. They are brothers, bound by their shared duty and shared sacrifice. The Night's Watch has faced many challenges throughout its history. In addition to the constant threat of the White Walkers, the Watch has also had to deal with the Wildlings, a group of free people who live beyond the Wall. The Wildlings, who call themselves the Free Folk, do not recognize the authority of the Iron Throne or any of the kingdoms of Westeros. They have their own leaders, customs, and way of life. Over the centuries, there have been many conflicts between the Night's Watch and the Wildlings, including several large-scale invasions known as wildling incursions. One of the most significant of these was the Great Ranging, led by Lord Commander Jorah Mormont, which ended in disaster and revealed the growing threat of the White Walkers. The Night's Watch is a unique institution in Westeros because it is a place where all men are equal. Once a man takes the black, he is no longer judged by his birth, his wealth, or his past. He is judged only by his loyalty and his courage. This principle has allowed men of all backgrounds to rise to positions of leadership within the Watch. For example, Jon Snow, the illegitimate son of Eddard Stark, became Lord Commander despite his low birth. The Night's Watch has also played a crucial role in the defense of Westeros. Its watchful presence has protected the realm from the dangers of the far north for thousands of years. Even when the kingdoms of Westeros were divided by war and politics, the Night's Watch remained a constant force, a reminder that there were greater threats beyond the Wall. The impact of the Night's Watch on the history of Westeros cannot be overstated. It is a symbol of duty, sacrifice, and brotherhood. It has preserved the memory of the Long Night and the threat of the White Walkers, ensuring that the people of Westeros never forget the darkness that once nearly destroyed the world. It has also served as a place of refuge for those who have nowhere else to go, giving them a chance to find purpose and honor. But the Night's Watch is also a reminder that the darkness has never truly vanished. The Wall stands, but the White Walkers wait in the frozen wastes, a silent threat that has never been completely defeated. The brothers of the Night's Watch stand as the last line of defense, their black cloaks a shadow against the cold sky, their oaths a promise that they will stand against the darkness for this night and all the nights to come. The Horn of Winter's Forgotten Call. The Horn of Winter, also known as the Horn of Joramun, is a legendary artifact in the history of Westeros, specifically in the mythology of the Free Folk, also known as the Wildlings, who live beyond the Wall. According to legend, the Horn of Winter was a powerful, magical horn capable of bringing down the Wall itself. A massive barrier of ice and stone that stretches for 300 miles across the northern border of Westeros. The Wall was built approximately 8,000 years before the events of Game of Thrones, and it was constructed by Bran the Builder, a legendary figure of the Age of Heroes. With the assistance of the children of the forest and the giants. The Wall was designed to protect the realms of men from the dangers of the far north, including the White Walkers, but the Horn of Winter was said to have the power to destroy it. The legend of the Horn of Winter is closely connected to the story of Joramun, a mythical king beyond the Wall who led the Free Folk in ancient times. Joramun was a great leader who united the various tribes of the Free Folk and led them in a great struggle against the Night's Watch and the kingdoms of Westeros. It is said that Joramun discovered the Horn of Winter and used it to awaken the giants from the earth, rallying them to his cause. The idea of the Horn of Winter having the power to bring down the wall became a central part of the mythology of the Free Folk. The wildlings believed that if they could find and use the Horn of Winter, they would be able to destroy the wall and escape the frozen lands beyond, gaining access to the warmer and more fertile lands of the south. This belief made the Horn of Winter a symbol of hope and freedom for the Free Folk, but it also made it a source of fear for the Night's Watch and the kingdoms of Westeros. Despite its legendary status, the existence of the Horn of Winter is a subject of debate among scholars and historians in Westeros. Some believe that the horn is purely a myth, a story created by the wildlings to inspire fear and hope. Others believe that it is a real artifact, an ancient relic imbued with magical power, possibly created by the children of the forest, who were known to have a deep understanding of magic and nature. The belief in the Horn of Winter was revived during the Great Ranging, an expedition led by Lord Commander Jorah Mormont of the Night's Watch beyond the Wall. During this expedition, the Night's Watch discovered a large ancient horn among the ruins of a wildling camp. The horn was large, black, and intricately carved, leading many to speculate that it was the fabled Horn of Winter. However, the horn was later revealed to be a fake, and the true Horn of Winter remained lost, its fate unknown. The Horn of Winter also played a role in the story of Mance Rayder, the king beyond the wall during the events of Game of Thrones. Mance Rayder was a former member of the Night's Watch who abandoned his vows and became the leader of the Free Folk. He united the wildling tribes and led them in a massive migration south, seeking to escape the growing threat of the White Walkers. To gain the loyalty of the wildlings, Mance claimed to possess the Horn of Winter and threatened to use it to bring down the wall if the Night's Watch did not allow his people to pass. However, it was later revealed that the horn Mance possessed was not the true Horn of Winter, but an ordinary horn used as a bluff. Despite this, the legend of the Horn of Winter continued to influence the actions of the Free Folk and the Night's Watch. The Horn of Winter is also significant because of its connection to the Children of the Forest. The Children were an ancient mystical race who lived in Westeros long before the arrival of the First Men. They were deeply connected to the natural world and possessed powerful magic. Some theories suggest that the Horn of Winter may have been a creation of the Children of the Forest, designed as a weapon to control or destroy the wall. If true, this would mean that the horn is not merely a myth, but a powerful magical artifact with the ability to manipulate the wall, which was built using the combined efforts of the First Men, the Children of the Forest, and the Giants. Another theory is that the Horn of Winter is connected to the White Walkers, the ancient beings of ice and death who threatened Westeros during the Long Night. Some believe that the horn was originally a tool of the White Walkers, a means of destroying the wall and reclaiming the lands of Westeros. This theory suggests that the horn is not only a threat to the Night's Watch, but to all of Westeros, as it could allow the White Walkers to invade the realm unopposed. Despite the uncertainty surrounding the Horn of Winter, its legend has persisted for thousands of years, becoming a symbol of power, freedom, and fear. It is a reminder of the ancient magic that still lingers in the world, a magic that predates the kingdoms of men and the Iron Throne. It is also a reminder of the fragile nature of the wall and the constant threat posed by the darkness beyond. The existence of the Horn of Winter has never been definitively proven, but the belief in its power has had a significant impact on the history of Westeros. It has influenced the actions of the free folk, who have sought the Horn as a means of escaping the frozen north. It has influenced the Night's Watch, who have feared the possibility of the Horn being used to bring down the Wall. It has also influenced the kingdoms of Westeros, who have relied on the Wall as a shield against the darkness of the far north. The story of the Horn of Winter is a reminder of the ancient history of Westeros, a history filled with legends, magic, and forgotten powers. It is a story of a people who sought freedom, of a wall that stood as a barrier against darkness, and of a horn whose call could bring that barrier crashing down. Whether the Horn of Winter is a myth or a real artifact, its legend continues to echo across the frozen wastes beyond the Wall and throughout the 7 kingdoms of Westeros. The Night's Watch continues to stand guard. The Wall remains a silent sentinel against the cold, and the memory of the Horn of Winter endures as a symbol of the ancient magic that still haunts the world. The Old Gods and the Sacred Weirwoods. The Old Gods are an ancient and deeply respected belief system in Westeros, a religion that dates back to the earliest inhabitants of the continent, the Children of the Forest. The Children of the Forest were a mystical, non-human race who lived in the vast forests of Westeros long before the arrival of the first men. They worshipped the Old Gods, who were not depicted as individual deities, but rather as a collection of spirits connected to the natural world. The heart of this ancient faith is found in the sacred Weirwoods, massive trees with white bark and blood-red leaves. These trees were considered sacred because the Children of the Forest believed that the Old Gods lived within them. Faces were carved into the trunks of the Weirwoods, transforming them into heart trees, and these heart trees served as places of worship and prayer. When the first men arrived in Westeros, they initially clashed with the Children of the Forest, leading to a brutal and prolonged conflict. But over time, a peace agreement known as the Pact was reached, and the first men adopted many of the customs and beliefs of the Children, including the worship of the Old Gods. They began to carve faces into the Weirwoods, believing that the Old Gods could see through the eyes of these trees and hear the prayers of the faithful. The sacred Weirwoods were often found in groves known as Godswoods, which became places of worship. In the north, many noble families maintained Godswoods within their castles, where the heart tree stood as a symbol of their connection to the Old Gods. The most famous of these is the Godswood at Winterfell, where a massive weirwood with a solemn carved face stands at the center. Unlike other religions in Westeros, the faith of the Old Gods has no priests, temples, or organized rituals. Instead, it is a simple and personal form of worship, where individuals pray in the quiet of the Godswood, believing that the Old Gods are watching. The faith of the Old Gods is strongest in the north, where the descendants of the first men, such as the Starks of Winterfell, continue to honor these ancient traditions. Over time, the Old Gods and the sacred Weirwoods became a defining aspect of northern culture. The worship of the Old Gods was largely replaced in the south with the arrival of the Andals, who brought with them a new religion, the faith of the Seven. The Andals cut down many of the Weirwoods, seeing them as symbols of an old and primitive faith. But in the north, the sacred trees were preserved, and the Old Gods remained a central part of life. The Weirwoods also held a deeper significance for the Children of the Forest, According to legend, the children were capable of seeing through the eyes of the Weirwoods, a magical ability known as greensight. This gift allowed them to observe events across vast distances and even glimpse into the past. Some believe that the old gods were actually the spirits of the dead children of the forest, who had merged with the trees, giving them their power. Throughout the history of Westeros, the sacred Weirwoods served as silent witnesses to the rise and fall of kingdoms, the birth of great houses, and the struggles of heroes and villains. They stood as symbols of the enduring connection between the first men and the children of the forest, a reminder of an ancient pact that brought peace to the land. In the Game of Thrones series, the sacred Weirwoods play a significant role. Bran Stark, a member of House Stark, is revealed to possess the gift of greensight, allowing him to see through the eyes of the Weirwoods and learn the secrets of the past. Through his connection to the Weirwoods, Bran becomes the three-eyed raven, a mystical figure who holds the knowledge of the world. The old gods and the sacred Weirwoods are not just a religion, but a link to the ancient history of Westeros, a living memory of a time when magic was strong and the world was a place of mystery. They are a reminder that even in a world of power and politics, there are ancient forces that endure. The magic of Storm's End. Storm's End is one of the great castles of Westeros, located on the eastern coast of the Stormlands, facing the Narrow Sea. It is the ancestral seat of House Baratheon, one of the great noble houses of Westeros. The castle is renowned for its massive, impenetrable walls and its unique magical history. According to legend, Storm's End was built during the Age of Heroes, a period thousands of years before the events of Game of Thrones. The castle was constructed by Duran Godsgrief, the first Storm King, a legendary figure whose story is deeply tied to the history of the Stormlands. Duran was a mortal king who fell in love with Elenei, a daughter of the gods of the sea and the wind. Despite the warnings of the gods, Duran and Elenei married. In their anger, the gods unleashed a series of massive storms that destroyed Duran's castles, killing his family and followers. But Duran refused to surrender. He declared war on the gods and vowed to build a fortress that would withstand their fury. Duran built one castle after another, but each was destroyed by the storms. His followers begged him to abandon his quest, but he remained determined. Finally, Duran built a seventh castle with the help of a young boy who would later become known as Bran the Builder, a legendary figure who is also credited with building the wall in the far north. Bran the Builder was said to possess great knowledge of construction and magic, and it was with his guidance that Duran constructed Storm's End. The walls of Storm's End were unlike any other castle in Westeros. They were made of massive blocks of stone, perfectly fitted together without any visible mortar. The walls were smooth, curving, and incredibly thick, making them nearly impossible to breach. The castle was built on a high cliff, with a single, massive drum tower overlooking the sea. But it was not only the strength of the walls that made Storm's End special. It was said that Bran the Builder wove ancient spells of protection into the very stones of the castle. These spells were designed to shield the castle from the wrath of the gods, making it impervious to storms, lightning, and other natural disasters. Once the castle was completed, Duran took the name Duran Godsgrief, in defiance of the gods who had tried to destroy him. He and his wife Elenei lived in Storm's End, and the castle stood strong against the fury of the storms. The gods continued to rage, but their winds and waves could not breach the walls of Storm's End. Over the centuries, Storm's End became the seat of House Durrandon, the descendants of Durand Godsgrief. The Storm Kings of House Durrandon ruled the Stormlands from Storm's End for thousands of years, their power secured by the strength of their castle. Even during times of war and conflict, Storm's End remained unbroken. During the Targaryen conquest, when Aegon the Conqueror and his dragons swept across Westeros, Storm's End remained a formidable obstacle. Argilac the Arrogant, the last Storm King, refused to submit to Aegon and fought against the Targaryen invasion. But despite the strength of Storm's End, Argilac was defeated in battle by Orys Baratheon, one of Aegon's most trusted commanders. Orys Baratheon married Argilac's daughter and took Storm's End as his own, founding House Baratheon. From that point on, Storm's End became the seat of House Baratheon, who served as loyal vassals of House Targaryen for nearly 3 centuries. The magic of Storm's End continued to protect the castle, making it a symbol of strength and endurance. During Robert's rebellion, Storm's End once again demonstrated its strength. Stannis Baratheon, Robert's younger brother, was given command of the castle and ordered to hold it against the forces of House Tyrell, who were loyal to King Aerys II Targaryen. The Tyrells laid siege to Storm's End for over a year, but despite their overwhelming numbers, they could not breach the walls of the castle. Stannis and his men were reduced to eating rats and boiled leather, but they refused to surrender. The siege was finally lifted when Sir Davos Seaworth, a smuggler loyal to Stannis, sailed through the Tyrell blockade and delivered a shipment of onions and salted fish, saving the garrison from starvation. For his bravery, Davos was knighted by Stannis and became known as the Onion Knight. The magical protection of Storm's End is not just a legend. During the War of the Five Kings, Melisandre, a priestess of R'hllor and an advisor to Stannis Baratheon, demonstrated the power of the castle's magical defenses. When she attempted to enter Storm's End using her shadow magic, she was unable to do so because of the protective spells woven into the walls. This confirmed that the castle was indeed protected by ancient magic, making it unique among the great castles of Westeros. Storm's End has also been a symbol of legitimacy and power for House Baratheon. When Robert Baratheon led the rebellion against the Targaryens, he did so as the Lord of Storm's End. After becoming king, Robert continued to rule from King's Landing, but Storm's End remained the seat of his family. His brothers Stannis and Renly Baratheon both laid claim to Storm's End during the War of the Five Kings, each seeking to use the castle as a symbol of their right to rule. Renly Baratheon held the castle with the support of many of the southern lords, while Stannis laid siege to Storm's End in an attempt to claim it for himself. Renly was ultimately killed under mysterious circumstances, and Storm's End fell to Stannis without a battle. The history of Storm's End is a testament to the power of its walls and the magic that protects it. It is a castle that has withstood the wrath of the gods, the armies of the Storm Kings, the dragons of the Targaryens, and the sieges of the Tyrells. Its thick, impenetrable walls and its ancient spells have made it one of the most secure fortresses in Westeros. It is a symbol of strength, endurance, and defiance against the odds. The magic of Storm's End has also had a lasting impact on the legends and stories of Westeros. It is a reminder of the ancient power that still lingers in the world, a power that predates the Iron Throne and the Seven Kingdoms. It is also a reminder of the Age of Heroes, a time when great kings and powerful sorcerers shaped the world. Storm's End stands as a monument to that ancient history, a fortress whose strength has never been broken. Today, Storm's End remains the seat of House Baratheon, a family whose power has risen and fallen over the centuries. It is a place where ancient legends and modern politics intersect, a castle whose magic is both a legend and a reality. Its walls continue to stand against the storms of the Narrow Sea, and its history continues to inspire stories of courage, defiance, and endurance. The magic of Storm's End is not merely a myth. It is a legacy, a reminder that even in a world of swords and crowns, there are forces older and stronger than any king. The Cursed City of Valyria. Valyria was once the greatest civilization in the known world, a vast empire located on the continent of Essos, southeast of Westeros. It was a land of towering mountains, rivers of molten rock, and fertile plains. But what set Valyria apart from other ancient civilizations was its mastery of dragons. The Valyrians were a people of extraordinary power who tamed and rode dragons, giving them dominance over other cultures. This power was not simply the result of strength or courage, but was deeply connected to the magical properties of Valyria's volcanic landscape, known as the 14 Flames. These were a chain of active volcanoes, and it was here that the Valyrians discovered and harnessed the secrets of dragon lore. The origins of Valyria date back more than 5,000 years before the events of Game of Thrones. According to ancient texts, the Valyrians were originally humble shepherds who lived in the shadow of the 14 Flames. They were not a mighty empire, but a small tribe that eventually learned to tame dragons through ancient and dangerous sorcery. With dragons under their control, the Valyrians began to expand their influence across the surrounding lands. Over centuries, they built the Valyrian Freehold, an empire without a king, ruled by powerful families known as Dragon Lords. These families maintained their power through the use of dragons, as well as the practice of blood magic, which was whispered to be the source of their incredible longevity and strength. Valyria's influence spread rapidly, and it became known for its unmatched craftsmanship in weapons and armor. Valyrian steel, forged using spells and dragon fire, became the most coveted metal in the known world. Swords made of Valyrian steel were not only sharp and durable, but were also considered symbols of great power. Houses across Westeros, including the Starks with their sword ice, possessed these legendary weapons, each with its own history and name. The Valyrians built magnificent cities filled with towering spires, great temples, and vast libraries. Their language, High Valyrian, became a language of nobility and magic, a language still spoken by scholars and mages even centuries after the fall of Valyria. But despite its immense power and influence, Valyria was not without its enemies. The Ghiscari Empire, an ancient and powerful civilization that ruled Slaver's Bay, sought to challenge Valyria's dominance. 5 great wars were fought between the Valyrians and the Ghiscari. In each of these conflicts, the dragons of Valyria proved to be the decisive factor. The Ghiscari cities were reduced to ash, and their people were either destroyed or enslaved. Valyria's dragon lords carved their empire across the continent of Essos, founding colonies and client states. One of these colonies was Dragonstone, an island fortress off the coast of Westeros, which would later become the ancestral seat of House Targaryen. The Valyrians established a network of great roads known as the Dragon Roads, which connected their vast empire. These roads were said to be enchanted, built with magic to endure the passage of time without breaking or eroding. Valyrian architecture was renowned for its beauty and complexity, featuring towering spires, intricately carved statues, and grand palaces that seemed to touch the sky. The capital of the Valyrian freehold was simply known as Valyria, a city of unparalleled splendor and power. It was here that the most powerful Dragonlord families resided, ruling over their vast domains with absolute authority. But this great civilization came to a sudden and catastrophic end in an event known as the Doom of Valyria. In the year 102 BC, a series of massive volcanic eruptions shattered the Valyrian peninsula. The 14 flames erupted violently, and rivers of molten rock flowed across the land. The sky turned black with ash, and a great firestorm consumed the city of Valyria itself. The proud Dragonlords, their mighty cities, and their powerful magic were all consumed in a single day of unimaginable destruction. It is said that the dragons themselves perished in the flames, and the survivors who fled described it as a hellscape of fire and death. The cause of the doom remains a mystery, even in the time of Game of Thrones. Some believe that the Valyrians' use of blood magic and their constant struggle for power among the Dragonlord families may have triggered the disaster. Others suggest that the natural instability of the 14 flames was to blame. The most ominous theory suggests that the doom was the result of a curse, a punishment for the Valyrians' arrogance and cruelty. Whatever the cause, the Doom of Valyria shattered the greatest civilization the world had ever known, leaving behind only ruins and ash. Among the few who survived the Doom were the Targaryens, a minor Valyrian house who had settled on Dragonstone years before the disaster. House Targaryen possessed dragons and were able to escape the destruction because they were warned by a prophetic dream of Daenerys Targaryen, known as Daenerys the Dreamer. It was this dream that led her father, Lord Aenar Targaryen, to move his family to Dragonstone, saving them from the Doom. In the years that followed, the Targaryens would become the last surviving Dragonlords of Valyria, eventually using their dragons to conquer Westeros under Aegon the Conqueror. The ruins of Valyria became known as the Smoking Sea, a place of death and horror. Ships that ventured too close to the ruins often disappeared, and the shattered remnants of the city were haunted by strange creatures and deadly fumes. Even the bravest sailors avoided the area, and stories of ghostly apparitions and cursed treasures spread across Essos. Only a few dared to explore the ruins, including Euron Greyjoy of the Ironborn, who claimed to have walked the ruins of Valyria and returned with a suit of Valyrian steel armor. In the world of Game of Thrones, the memory of Valyria endures in the form of ancient texts, magical artifacts, and the blood of the Targaryens. Valyrian steel swords, passed down through generations, remain among the most valuable treasures of noble houses. The language of High Valyrian is still spoken by scholars, and the ruins of Valyria stand as a reminder of the terrible power and arrogance of the Dragonlords. The Doom of Valyria is a lesson in the dangers of unchecked power and the fragility of even the greatest civilizations. The cursed city of Valyria remains a symbol of lost glory, a reminder that even the most powerful empires can be reduced to ash in an instant. Its ruins stand as a warning to those who would seek to master forces beyond their control. The Doom of Valyria The Doom of Valyria was a catastrophic event that destroyed the Valyrian freehold, one of the most advanced and powerful civilizations in the history of Westeros and Essos. The Valyrian freehold was an empire located on the Valyrian Peninsula in the eastern continent of Essos. It was founded over 5,000 years before the events of Game of Thrones by a group of shepherds who discovered the existence of dragons in the volcanic mountains known as the 14 Flames. Using their newly discovered ability to tame and control dragons, the Valyrians transformed from simple shepherds into powerful dragonlords. Over the centuries, the Valyrian freehold expanded, conquering much of Essos through the use of dragonfire and advanced magical knowledge. Valyria became a center of culture, trade, and learning, with its capital city, Valyria, being known as the greatest city in the world. The Valyrian freehold was ruled by powerful noble families, known as Dragonlord families, with the most prominent among them being House Targaryen, House Valyrian, and House Celtigar. These families bred and rode dragons, using them to maintain their dominance over their vast empire. The Valyrian freehold was known for its mastery of magic, particularly fire magic and blood magic. The Valyrians used their magical knowledge to forge Valyrian steel, a rare and incredibly strong metal that was highly prized throughout the world. Valyrian steel swords were not only deadly weapons, but also symbols of power and prestige. The Valyrians also built great roads, majestic cities, and towering fortresses, many of which were constructed using sorcery and dragonfire. Valyria was a society built on the exploitation of slaves, who were used to mine the dangerous volcanoes of the 14 Flames and to serve the noble families of the freehold. Slavery was an integral part of Valyrian society, and the Valyrian dragonlords used their power to conquer and enslave countless peoples across Essos. The Doom of Valyria occurred approximately 400 years before the events of Game of Thrones. It was a sudden and catastrophic event that resulted in the complete destruction of the Valyrian Peninsula and the collapse of the Valyrian freehold. The cause of the doom is not fully known, but it is believed to have been a series of massive volcanic eruptions from the 14 Flames, which unleashed a devastating combination of fire, smoke, and molten rock. The great city of Valyria, along with the surrounding lands, was completely destroyed. The skies were filled with ash and fire, the ground was shattered, and the seas boiled. The once mighty Valyrian dragonlords, along with their dragons, were annihilated in an instant. The doom was so sudden and so complete that it shattered the Valyrian freehold, leaving behind only a smoking wasteland known as the Smoking Sea. The once great city of Valyria was reduced to a ruin of twisted, melted stone, a place where the air was thick with poison and the land was cursed. The survivors of the doom were few, and those who managed to escape were scattered across Essos. One of the most notable survivors of the doom was House Targaryen. Unlike the other Valyrian dragonlord families, House Targaryen had settled on the island of Dragonstone, located in the narrow sea off the eastern coast of Westeros, several years before the doom. The head of House Targaryen at the time, Daenerys Targaryen, had a prophetic dream foretelling the destruction of Valyria, and she convinced her father, Lord Aenar Targaryen, to relocate the family to Dragonstone. When the doom struck, the Targaryens and their dragons were safely on Dragonstone, making them one of the only dragonlord families to survive. The Doom of Valyria had a profound impact on the history of Westeros and Essos. The Valyrian freehold, which had been the dominant power in the known world for over 5,000 years, was suddenly gone. The cities and kingdoms that had once been subject to Valyrian rule were left in chaos, and new powers rose to fill the void left by the fallen empire. In Essos, the city of Volantis, one of the free cities that had once been part of the Valyrian freehold, attempted to establish itself as the new center of Valyrian power, but it was ultimately unsuccessful. The other free cities, including Braavos, Pentos, Lys, Myr, and Norvos, gained their independence and became powerful city-states in their own right. Braavos, in particular, grew in power and influence, becoming a major center of trade and finance. The Doom also led to the rise of House Targaryen. With their dragons and their Valyrian heritage, the Targaryens were able to establish themselves as a powerful family in Westeros. Over a century after the Doom, Aegon Targaryen, known as Aegon the Conqueror, used his dragons to conquer and unite the 7 kingdoms of Westeros, establishing the Targaryen dynasty that would rule for nearly 300 years. The legacy of Valyria continued through the Targaryens, who maintained the tradition of dragon riding, the use of Valyrian steel, and the practice of marrying within the family to preserve their Valyrian bloodline. The Doom of Valyria also left behind a number of mysteries. The ruins of Valyria, known as the ruins of Old Valyria, are a dangerous and cursed place, filled with toxic smoke, twisted stone, and strange creatures. It is said that the air in Valyria is poisonous, and that the sea around it is boiling. Sailors who venture too close to the smoking sea are often lost, and those who return speak of ghostly shapes and twisted shadows moving among the ruins. Some believe that the Doom was not a natural disaster, but a magical catastrophe caused by the Valyrian dragonlords themselves, who were experimenting with dangerous and forbidden sorcery. Others believe that it was a punishment from the gods for the arrogance and cruelty of the Valyrians. The true cause of the Doom may never be known. The destruction of Valyria also led to the loss of much of the ancient knowledge and magic that had once made the Valyrian freehold great. The secrets of Valyrian steel, the knowledge of dragon taming, and the ancient spells of the Valyrian sorcerers were lost with the destruction of the freehold. Only a few fragments of Valyrian knowledge survived, preserved by the Targaryens and a few other families who managed to escape the Doom. The Doom of Valyria is remembered as one of the greatest catastrophes in the history of the known world. It marked the end of an era of Valyrian dominance and the beginning of a new age in which the free cities of Essos and the kingdoms of Westeros rose to power. It also serves as a cautionary tale, a reminder of the dangers of unchecked power, hubris, and the destructive force of magic. The Targaryens, who survived the Doom, would go on to build a new empire in Westeros, but they never forgot their Valyrian heritage. The words of House Targaryen, Fire and Blood, are a reminder of their connection to the fallen empire of Valyria and the dragons that once ruled the skies. The Doom of Valyria remains a haunting memory, a story of a civilization that rose to greatness through fire and magic, only to be destroyed in an instant by a force beyond their control. It is a story of pride, power, and destruction, a story that has shaped the history of Westeros and Essos for centuries. The blood of the Dragonlords. The blood of the Dragonlords refers to the ancient lineage of Valyrian Dragonlords, a powerful and noble class who ruled the Valyrian freehold, the greatest empire in the known world. This bloodline was not just a mark of nobility, but was believed to grant unique abilities, including the power to bond with dragons. The Valyrian Dragon Lords were a distinct and elite group, known for their silver, gold, or platinum blonde hair, purple or violet eyes, and their near-mythical ability to tame and ride dragons. Their power and influence were unparalleled, and they dominated the known world for nearly 5,000 years before the Doom of Valyria. The origins of the Dragon Lords can be traced back to the 14 Flames, a chain of active volcanoes in the Valyrian peninsula of Essos. It was in this region that the ancient Valyrians, once humble shepherds, discovered dragons living within the volcanic mountains. Through a combination of sorcery and careful breeding, they learned to tame these massive and deadly creatures. The ability to bond with dragons was believed to be connected to their bloodline, passed down through generations. The Valyrians became a society ruled by powerful noble families known as Dragon Lords, each maintaining a stable of dragons and practicing strict blood purity to preserve their unique abilities. The Dragon Lords of Valyria were not governed by a single king or emperor. Instead, they were part of the Valyrian Freehold, a system of government that allowed each of the great Dragon Lord families to rule their own domains while participating in a council known as the 40 Families. These families were the most powerful in Valyria, each possessing their own dragons and wealth. They used blood magic, a form of sorcery believed to enhance their powers and ensure the continued strength of their bloodline. Marriages among the Dragon Lords were often arranged to maintain the purity of their blood, and it was common for siblings to marry one another, a practice that continued even after the Doom of Valyria. The most famous of the Dragon Lord families was House Targaryen, which was one of the minor houses in Valyria. Unlike the more powerful families who remained in the capital city of Valyria, House Targaryen established itself on the island of Dragonstone, off the coast of Westeros. This decision was made by Lord Aenor Targaryen, who relocated his family to Dragonstone after his daughter Daenerys the Dreamer had a prophetic vision of the Doom of Valyria. This decision saved House Targaryen from destruction, making them the last surviving Dragonlord family after the Doom. The Doom of Valyria occurred in the year 102 BC, a catastrophic event in which the 14 Flames erupted in a series of massive volcanic explosions. The entire Valyrian peninsula was devastated, and the proud city of Valyria, with its towering spires and mighty walls, was destroyed in a single day. The Dragon Lords and their dragons perished in the flames, and the once great Valyrian freehold was reduced to a smoking ruin. The precise cause of the doom remains a mystery. Some believe it was the result of a natural disaster, while others suspect it was the consequence of dangerous magical experiments conducted by the Dragon Lords. Whatever the cause, the doom ended the reign of the Dragon Lords and left only ruins and ash. House Targaryen, having settled on Dragonstone, survived the doom with a small number of dragons. This placed them in a unique position as the last Dragon Lords in the world. Over a century later, in the year 2 BC, Aegon Targaryen, known as Aegon the Conqueror, launched his conquest of Westeros with his sisters, Visenya and Rhaenys, and their 3 dragons, Balerion, Vhagar, and Meraxes. Aegon's conquest established the Targaryen dynasty as the rulers of Westeros, and the blood of the Dragon Lords became the blood of Westerosi kings. The Targaryens maintained the Valyrian tradition of marrying within their own family to preserve their bloodline, a practice that caused scandal and controversy among the Westerosi nobility. The blood of the Dragon Lords was believed to grant a natural affinity for dragons. Members of House Targaryen and other Valyrian-descended houses, such as House Velaryon and House Celtigar, were known to possess this affinity. They could ride dragons without fear, and they shared a mysterious bond with the creatures. This bond was not fully understood, but it was believed to be linked to ancient sorcery and the magical nature of Valyria itself. The Targaryens were able to maintain their dominance in Westeros for nearly 3 centuries because of their dragons, which served as powerful weapons of war and symbols of their divine right to rule. However, the blood of the Dragon Lords was not without its dangers. The Targaryen bloodline was known for its volatility, a trait attributed to their practice of inbreeding. This resulted in a history of madness, cruelty, and instability among the Targaryen kings. Some, like King Jaehaerys I, were wise and just rulers, while others, like King Maegor the Cruel, were infamous for their brutality. The Targaryen dynasty was also marked by fierce rivalries, including the Targaryen Civil War, known as the Dance of the Dragons, which saw the Targaryen family turn against itself in a brutal conflict that nearly destroyed them. The bond between the Dragon Lords and their dragons began to weaken over time. During the Dance of the Dragons, many of the Targaryen dragons were killed, and by the end of the conflict, the remaining dragons were smaller and weaker than their ancestors. The last dragon of House Targaryen died during the reign of King Aegon III, earning him the title of Dragonbane. With the death of the last dragon, the Targaryens lost their greatest source of power, and their dynasty began to decline. Without dragons, they became vulnerable to rebellion and internal strife, and their rule eventually came to an end when Robert Baratheon led a successful rebellion against King Aerys II, known as the Mad King. Even after the fall of the Targaryen dynasty, the blood of the Dragon Lords continued to flow in Westeros. Daenerys Targaryen, the last surviving member of House Targaryen, was born during the final days of Robert's rebellion and lived in exile for most of her life. She eventually became known as the Mother of Dragons after hatching 3 dragon eggs gifted to her by Illyrio Mopatis. These dragons, named Drogon, Rhaegal, and Viserion, became symbols of her claim to the Iron Throne and her attempt to restore the Targaryen dynasty. The blood of the Dragon Lords remains a symbol of power and mystery in the world of Game of Thrones. It is a reminder of the greatness of Valyria and the terrible cost of its fall. It is a legacy that has shaped the history of Westeros, from the conquest of Aegon the Conqueror to the rise of Daenerys Targaryen. The Targaryens' ability to bond with dragons and their belief in the divine right to rule set them apart from other noble houses, making them both revered and feared. The blood of the Dragon Lords is not just a mark of ancestry, but a legacy of magic, power, and tragedy. The Silent Songs of Bael the Bard. Bael the Bard is a legendary figure in the history of Westeros, known primarily for his role in the folklore of the North and his connection to House Stark of Winterfell. Bael was a wildling, a member of the Free Folk who lived beyond the Wall. He was famous among the wildlings for his skill as a singer, poet, and trickster, but his legacy is most closely associated with a tale involving the ancient lords of Winterfell. According to the story, Bael was a renowned singer who was admired even in the lands south of the Wall. His reputation reached Winterfell, the ancient seat of House Stark, where the Stark Lord challenged Bael to prove his skill. Disguised as a traveling bard, Bael came to Winterfell and performed a song so beautiful that the Stark Lord was moved to offer him a reward. Bael requested a single flower, a blue winter rose, from the glass gardens of Winterfell. The Stark Lord agreed, seeing this as a modest request. But the next morning, the Stark Lord discovered that his daughter had disappeared, and a single blue winter rose was found on her bed. For months, the Stark Lord searched for his daughter, but she was nowhere to be found. The people of Winterfell whispered that she had been stolen by Bael the Bard, but the Stark Lord could find no trace of her. Eventually, she reappeared in her bedchamber, holding a child in her arms. She revealed that she had been hidden with Bael in the crypts of Winterfell, and that the child she held was their son. The Stark Lord was furious, but he could not harm his own grandson. The child was raised as a Stark, and his descendants became the future lords of Winterfell. This tale is significant because it suggests that the blood of the free folk, the wildlings beyond the wall, flows in the veins of the Starks of Winterfell. It is a reminder of the ancient connections between the people of the North and the wild lands beyond the wall. The story of Bael the Bard is told in the North as a cautionary tale and as a piece of folklore that reflects the complex relationship between the North and the free folk. It is a story of love, deception, and pride. But there is more to Bael's story. According to some versions of the tale, Bael later returned to the lands beyond the wall, where he became a great chieftain among the wildlings. But his life ended in tragedy. During one of the many conflicts between the wildlings and the Night's Watch, Bael was killed by his own son, who did not know his father's true identity. This twist in the tale adds a tragic element to Bael's story, transforming it from a simple legend into a tale of fate and irony. Bael the Bard is remembered as one of the most famous and influential figures in the folklore of the North. His story is a reflection of the ancient ties between the Starks of Winterfell and the Free Folk, as well as a reminder of the thin line that separates the people of the North from the wild lands beyond the wall. It is a story that has been told and retold for generations, with each retelling adding new details and variations. In the North, Bael is remembered as both a hero and a villain, a man whose cunning and talent won him fame, but whose pride led to his downfall. The story of Bael the Bard is significant not only as a piece of northern folklore, but also as a reflection of the themes of identity and heritage that run throughout the history of Westeros. It is a story of a man who defied the boundaries of class and tradition, a man who used his talent to win the heart of a noble lady, and who left a mark on the history of one of the greatest houses of the North. It is also a story of the tension between the people of the North and the Free Folk, a tension that has shaped the history of the region for thousands of years. In the context of Game of Thrones, the story of Bael the Bard is told by Ygritte, a wildling woman who becomes the lover of Jon Snow, a member of the Night's Watch and the illegitimate son of Eddard Stark of Winterfell. Ygritte tells the story to Jon as a way of explaining the complex history between the Free Folk and the people of the North. The tale of Bael the Bard serves as a reminder to Jon that the lines between the Free Folk and the people of Westeros are not as clear as they seem. It is a story that emphasizes the shared heritage and common humanity of the two groups. Bael the Bard's story also highlights the role of music, poetry, and storytelling in the culture of Westeros. In a world defined by war and political intrigue, the songs of Bael the Bard are a reminder of the power of art and the importance of stories. They are a reflection of the culture of the North, a culture that values honor, tradition, and the memory of the past. The story of Bael the Bard has also inspired various interpretations and theories among fans of Game of Thrones. Some have suggested that Bael may have been an actual historical figure, while others see him as a purely fictional character created to explain the connection between the Starks and the Free Folk. There are also theories that suggest that Bael's story may contain hidden symbolism, reflecting the themes of identity, family, and betrayal that are central to the history of Westeros. One of the most significant aspects of Bael's story is its connection to the character of Jon Snow. As a man of the Night's Watch, with both Stark and Wildling blood, Jon is a living embodiment of the themes explored in Bael's story. He is a man caught between two worlds, struggling to reconcile his loyalty to the Night's Watch with his growing understanding of the Free Folk. In this sense, the story of Bael the Bard is not just a tale of the past, but a reflection of the challenges faced by Jon Snow and the other characters in Game of Thrones. The legacy of Bael the Bard is one of mystery and complexity. His story is a reminder of the ancient connections between the North and the lands beyond the Wall, a connection that has shaped the history of the region for thousands of years. It is a story that explores the themes of love, pride, and fate, and that challenges the traditional boundaries between noble and common, civilized and wild. It is a story that has been told for generations in the North, a story that has become a part of the culture and identity of the people who live in the shadow of Winterfell. The story of Bael the Bard is one of the many legends that make up the rich tapestry of the history of Westeros. It is a story that reminds us that even in a world of kings and castles, the power of music, poetry, and storytelling can shape history and leave a lasting legacy. Today, Bael the Bard is remembered as a figure of legend, a man whose songs and deeds have become part of the folklore of the North. His story is a reminder of the power of stories to preserve the memory of the past and to explore the complexity of human nature. The silent songs of Bael the Bard continue to echo across the frozen fields of the North, a quiet reminder of the ancient history and the enduring spirit of the people who call it home. The Shadowed Isles of the Faceless Men. In the world of Game of Thrones, the Faceless Men are one of the most mysterious and feared organizations in the known world. They are a secretive order of assassins who possess the ability to change their appearance at will, a power granted to them through their mastery of ancient magic. The origins of the Faceless Men can be traced back to the city of Braavos, a free city located in the northern part of Essos. Braavos itself was founded by slaves who escaped from the Valyrian freehold, fleeing from the brutal dragon lords who ruled the great Valyrian Empire. These escaped slaves sought refuge in the remote and hidden lagoon that would become Braavos, a city of canals and shadowed alleys. The Faceless Men are believed to have originated among the slaves who toiled in the mines beneath the volcanic mountains of Valyria, known as the 14 Flames. These mines were brutal and deadly, and the slaves who worked there suffered unimaginable hardships. It was in this dark and oppressive environment that the first Faceless Man is said to have emerged. According to legend, he was a slave who took pity on his fellow slaves, who lived in constant suffering and despair. He saw that all men, regardless of their status or station, suffered in some way. Believing that death was a gift, he began to offer this gift to those who sought an end to their suffering. This act of mercy marked the beginning of the Order of the Faceless Men. Over time, the teachings of the first Faceless Man spread among the slaves, and his followers established a secret order dedicated to the worship of the many-faced god. This god was not a single deity, but a representation of all gods of death worshipped by different cultures. The Faceless Men believed that all deities of death were simply different faces of the same divine force, the many-faced god. They came to view themselves as his servants, offering the gift of death to those who sought it, whether as an escape from suffering or as a form of divine judgment. After the Doom of Valyria, which occurred in the year 102 BC, many of the surviving followers of the many-faced god fled to the city of Braavos. Braavos was an ideal sanctuary for the Faceless Men, as it was a city founded by those who had escaped oppression and sought freedom. In Braavos, the Faceless Men established their headquarters in a place known as the House of Black and White. This ancient temple was located on the Isle of the Gods, one of the many islands that made up the city. The House of Black and White was a place of mystery, a solemn and shadowed sanctuary where the Faceless Men worshipped the many-faced god and trained new members in the secret arts of their order. The House of Black and White was not only a temple, but also a sanctuary for those who sought death. Within its halls were sacred pools where the sick and the suffering could drink the poisoned waters and find release. The walls of the temple were adorned with masks representing the many faces of death, a symbol of the Faceless Men's belief in the universality of death. Those who wished to become Faceless Men were trained in the arts of disguise, stealth, and assassination. But the most important lesson they learned was that they must surrender their own identities, becoming no one. This process involved a rigorous and often brutal training regimen, in which initiates were forced to abandon their former lives, names, and even their sense of self. The Faceless Men were not merely assassins for hire. They were a religious order who viewed their killings as sacred acts, a form of worship to the many-faced god. They accepted contracts to kill individuals, but they only did so if the proper price was paid. This price was not always measured in gold. Sometimes it required a sacrifice, a service, or a secret. The price for a life was determined by the priests of the House of Black and White, who were the senior members of the order. The Faceless Men were known for their absolute discretion and their ability to fulfill even the most impossible contracts, using their magical abilities to change their faces and identities. The process by which the Faceless Men changed their faces was a closely guarded secret, but it was known to involve the use of preserved faces of the dead. These faces were stored in the Hall of Faces, a vast chamber within the House of Black and White, where the faces of the dead were kept, preserved by mysterious means. When a Faceless Man wished to adopt a new identity, he would take one of these faces and use it to disguise himself. The transformation was not merely a physical change. It was also a spiritual one, as the Faceless Men were taught to truly become the person they were impersonating, adopting their mannerisms, voice, and even their memories. This ability made them nearly unstoppable as assassins, capable of approaching their targets without being recognized. Throughout the history of Westeros, the Faceless Men were known as a shadowy and deadly presence. Kings, lords, and wealthy merchants sometimes sought their services to eliminate rivals or enemies. But the Faceless Men did not always accept such contracts, as their allegiance was to the many-faced god, not to wealth or power. They were feared and respected, but they were also viewed with a sense of awe and dread, as their power seemed to defy the natural order. In the world of Game of Thrones, the most famous encounter with the Faceless Men is through the character of Arya Stark, who travels to Braavos and trains at the House of Black and White in her quest for vengeance. Arya's journey among the Faceless Men reveals both the power and the limitations of their order. She learns the arts of disguise and stealth, but she ultimately rejects their philosophy of becoming no one. Instead, she retains her own identity, using the skills she has learned to pursue her own goals rather than surrendering to the will of the many-faced god. This decision places her in conflict with the Faceless Men, but it also allows her to reclaim her sense of self and her family name. The Faceless Men remain one of the most enigmatic and dangerous organizations in the world of Game of Thrones. Their belief in the many-faced god, their mastery of disguise, and their willingness to kill without question make them a force to be feared. But they are not merely assassins. They are a religious order with a deep and ancient faith, one that sees death not as a punishment, but as a gift, a release from suffering. The House of Black and White stands as a testament to their faith, a shadowed temple where the faces of the dead are preserved, and the servants of death carry out their sacred mission. The shadowed aisles of the Faceless Men are a reminder of the darkness that lies beneath even the most civilized societies, a place where life and death are mere shadows on the wall. The Faceless Men are not just killers. They are believers who see themselves as servants of a greater truth, a truth that all men must face in the end. The Black Fires of Harrenhal. It was a time of ambition and conquest, a time when kings dreamed of immortality and empires were forged through blood and steel. In the heart of the Riverlands, near the northern shore of the God's Eye Lake, rose a castle unlike any other. Harrenhal was not just a fortress. It was a monument to the power of King Harrenhal, known as Harren the Black, the last king of the Iron Islands to rule the Riverlands. His vision was to create the largest and most impregnable castle in Westeros, a fortress that would stand for 1,000 years and secure his legacy. Construction of Harrenhal began late in Harren's reign and took over 40 years to complete. Thousands of workers were forced to labor on the massive project, carving stone from the mountains, hauling it across the Riverlands, and building walls so thick that they were said to be impenetrable. Harren spared no expense, draining the wealth of his kingdom and forcing his subjects into backbreaking labor. The castle's design was a reflection of Harren's ambition. Its walls were towering and thick. Its 5 massive towers were the tallest in Westeros, and its great hall was large enough to hold an entire army. Harren believed that this fortress would make him invincible, a monument to his power that would defy any enemy. But Harrenhal was completed at the worst possible time for Harren the Black. On the very day that the castle was finished, a new threat appeared on the eastern coast of Westeros. Aegon Targaryen, known as Aegon the Conqueror, landed at Dragonstone with his sister wives Visenya and Rhaenys, and their 3 dragons, Balerion the Black Dread, Vhagar, and Meraxes. Aegon began his campaign of conquest, seeking to unite the 7 kingdoms under his rule. When Aegon's forces reached the Riverlands, Harren the Black refused to surrender. Confident in the strength of his new castle, he believed that its thick stone walls would protect him from any attack. He mocked Aegon's dragons, believing that fire could not harm stone. But Aegon knew the true power of his dragons. He mounted Balerion the Black Dread, the largest and most fearsome of his dragons, and flew over the walls of Harrenhal. From the skies above, Aegon unleashed a storm of dragonfire upon the castle. The heat was so intense that the thick stone walls of Harrenhal cracked and melted. The great towers twisted and collapsed, and the vast halls were engulfed in flames. Harren the Black and his sons were burned alive within the castle, and the once great fortress was reduced to a blackened, twisted ruin. The destruction of Harrenhal marked the end of House Hoare and the conquest of the Riverlands by Aegon Targaryen. Aegon granted the ruined castle to House Coherys, one of his loyal supporters, but Harrenhal's story was far from over. Despite its ruined state, it remained one of the largest and most formidable castles in Westeros. Yet it soon became known as a cursed place. Almost every noble family that held Harrenhal met with misfortune. House Coherys, the first family to hold the castle after House Hoare, fell into decline and disappeared within a few generations. House Harroway, the second family to take possession of Harrenhal, rose to power under King Maegor Targaryen, but was eventually destroyed when Maegor ordered the execution of the entire family. House Towers and House Strong followed, each meeting a tragic end. House Strong was destroyed by a mysterious fire that swept through the castle, killing Lord Lionel Strong, Hand of the King, and his son, Sir Harwin Strong. Some whispered that the fire was an act of murder, but the true cause was never revealed. House Lothston, which took possession of Harrenhal after House Strong, became known for its dark reputation. Lady Danelle Lothston, known as Mad Danelle, was rumored to have practiced dark magic and to have tortured her enemies in the dungeons of Harrenhal. Her cruelty and madness led to the fall of House Lothston, and the castle was granted to House Went. House Went became the last noble family to hold Harrenhal before the events of Game of Thrones. During the reign of King Robert Baratheon, Harrenhal was the site of a grand tournament hosted by Lord Walter Went. This tournament was a major event in the history of Westeros, attracting many of the most powerful lords and knights of the realm. It was at this tournament that Prince Rhaegar Targaryen crowned Lyanna Stark as the Queen of Love and Beauty, a gesture that sparked the events leading to Robert's rebellion. During the War of the Five Kings, Harrenhal changed hands multiple times. It was held by House Lannister, then by House Stark, and later by House Baelish. Lord Tywin Lannister used the castle as a base of operations during the conflict, and it became the site of brutal atrocities committed by Sir Gregor Clegane, known as the Mountain. Harrenhal's vast halls and twisted towers served as a reminder of its cursed history, a place where ambition and cruelty seemed to lead only to ruin. Even the mighty and powerful who held the castle were eventually destroyed or driven away. The legend of the Curse of Harrenhal became part of the history of Westeros, a story of ambition, pride, and destruction. Harrenhal was not only a symbol of the fall of House Hoare and the power of Aegon's dragons, but also a reminder of the dangers of unchecked ambition and the destructive force of fire. Despite its cursed reputation, Harrenhal remains one of the largest castles in Westeros, a vast, crumbling ruin that continues to stand as a silent witness to the rise and fall of those who have tried to claim it. Its blackened towers and burned walls are a testament to the power of dragonfire and the ambitions of those who sought to make it their own. Harrenhal is a place where the past is always present, where the shadows of history continue to haunt the present. It is a castle that was built as a monument to the power of Harren the Black, but it became a symbol of destruction and despair. Today, Harrenhal remains a reminder of the fragile nature of power and the terrible cost of unchecked ambition. It is a place where the echoes of the past can still be heard, a castle whose blackened towers stand as a silent warning to those who would defy the power of fire and dragons. The black fires of Harrenhal have left a mark on the history of Westeros, a mark that can never be erased. The Red Keep and the Iron Throne's curse. In the heart of King's Landing, the capital of the Seven Kingdoms, stands a fortress of red stone overlooking the Blackwater Bay. This is the Red Keep, a grand and imposing castle that has witnessed the rise and fall of kings, the ambitions of great houses, and the endless struggles for power that have defined the history of Westeros. The story of the Red Keep begins in the year 2 BC, when Aegon I Targaryen, known as Aegon the Conqueror, chose the site for his new capital after uniting the Seven Kingdoms under his rule. At first, Aegon built a simple wooden fort on the site, known as Aegon Fort, which served as his temporary stronghold. But the need for a grander and more secure residence soon became apparent. The construction of the Red Keep began in the year 37 AC under the reign of Maegor Targaryen, a ruler known to history as Maegor the Cruel. Maegor was a brutal and authoritarian king who believed in absolute power. He ordered the construction of the Red Keep to be a fortress like no other, a symbol of his dominance and a stronghold that could protect the Iron Throne. The Red Keep was designed with thick walls, hidden passages, and secret tunnels, many of which were known only to the king. Maegor was obsessed with security and secrecy. When the Red Keep was completed in the year 45 AC, he ordered the execution of all the builders and masons who had worked on the castle to ensure that only he would know its secrets. The Red Keep was built using red-hued stone, which gave it its distinctive appearance and its name. The castle included many grand halls, towers, and chambers, but its most famous feature was the Great Hall, a vast chamber that housed the Iron Throne. The Iron Throne itself was a symbol of Targaryen power, a massive and imposing seat forged from the swords of Aegon's defeated enemies. According to legend, Aegon had the swords of his conquered foes melted together with the fire of his dragon, Balerion the Black Dread. The Iron Throne was not just a symbol of victory. It was also a reminder of the price of power, a chair made of twisted blades, sharp edges, and jagged metal that could injure anyone who sat upon it carelessly. The Iron Throne was a dangerous seat, not only because of its sharp edges, but because of the struggles for power that it represented. Throughout the history of the Targaryen dynasty, the Iron Throne became a source of endless conflict. Rival claimants, ambitious lords, and rebellious factions all sought to seize the throne, leading to a series of bloody wars and power struggles. One of the most devastating conflicts in the history of the Red Keep was the Targaryen Civil War, known as the Dance of the Dragons, which began in the year 129 AC. This war saw the Targaryen family divided against itself, with Princess Rhaenyra Targaryen and her half-brother Aegon II both claiming the Iron Throne. The Red Keep became a battleground as factions loyal to each claimant fought for control. The Dance of the Dragons left the Targaryen dynasty weakened and divided. Many of the Targaryen dragons were killed in the conflict, and the Red Keep became a place of death and betrayal. Princess Rhaenyra herself was captured and executed in the Great Hall of the Red Keep, burned alive by Aegon II's dragon Sunfire. The conflict ended with the death of Aegon II, but the scars of the war remained, and the Targaryen dynasty was never as strong as it had once been. The Red Keep continued to be the seat of power for the Targaryen kings, but it also became a place of fear and suspicion, a fortress haunted by the ghosts of those who had died in the struggle for the Iron Throne. The reign of King Aerys II Targaryen, known as the Mad King, brought new horrors to the Red Keep. Aerys, once a promising and intelligent ruler, became increasingly paranoid and violent in his later years. He filled the dungeons of the Red Keep with political prisoners, ordering their torture and execution. He developed an obsession with wildfire, a deadly and volatile substance that could burn even stone. Aerys ordered his pyromancers to store vast quantities of wildfire beneath the city, including beneath the Great Sept of Baelor and other key locations. In his madness, he planned to destroy King's Landing, rather than allow it to fall into the hands of his enemies. His plan was thwarted by Sir Jaime Lannister, a member of his Kingsguard, who killed Aerys to prevent the destruction of the city. This act earned Jaime the title of Kingslayer, a name that would follow him for the rest of his life. After the fall of the Targaryen dynasty, the Red Keep became the seat of House Baratheon under King Robert Baratheon, who claimed the Iron Throne after leading a successful rebellion. But the Red Keep remained a place of intrigue and betrayal. Robert's reign was marked by political scheming, most of it orchestrated by his wife, Queen Cersei Lannister, and her family. The Red Keep became a place of secrets and conspiracies, with courtiers and spies vying for power. It was here that King Robert died under suspicious circumstances, leading to a succession crisis that plunged the realm into the War of the Five Kings. The Red Keep saw the brutal trial of Tyrion Lannister, the murder of King Joffrey Baratheon, and the rise of Queen Cersei as a ruthless and cunning ruler. In the final years of the Game of Thrones series, the Red Keep became the scene of the final battle for King's Landing. Daenerys Targaryen, the last surviving member of House Targaryen, led an army against the city, seeking to reclaim the Iron Throne. Riding her dragon Drogon, Daenerys unleashed a devastating assault on the city, reducing much of it to ruins. The Red Keep itself was destroyed in the onslaught, and Queen Cersei Lannister and her brother Jaime died in the collapsing rubble. Daenerys declared herself queen, but her rule was short-lived, as she was killed by Jon Snow within the ruins of the Red Keep. The destruction of the Red Keep marked the end of the Targaryen dream and the final collapse of the Iron Throne. The Red Keep is more than just a castle. It is a symbol of the brutal struggle for power that has defined the history of Westeros. It is a place where kings and queens have risen and fallen, where alliances have been forged and betrayed, and where countless lives have been lost. The Iron Throne, with its jagged blades and twisted metal, is a reminder of the price of power and the curse that comes with it. Those who seek to rule from the Red Keep often find themselves caught in a web of intrigue, betrayal, and violence. The history of the Red Keep is a history of bloodshed, ambition, and the endless quest for power in the Seven Kingdoms. The Ghost of Harrenhal. Harrenhal is one of the largest and most infamous castles in Westeros, a fortress built by King Harrenhal, known as Harren the Black, during the later years of the Age of Heroes. Located on the northern shore of the God's Eye Lake in the Riverlands, it was designed to be an impregnable stronghold, with massive stone walls and towering spires. Construction of Harrenhal began under the rule of Harren the Black, the last king of the Iron Islands to hold dominion over the Riverlands. Harren's ambition was to create the largest and most powerful castle in Westeros, a fortress that would secure his legacy and demonstrate his power. The project took over 40 years to complete, and thousands of laborers were forced to work on the massive structure. The castle's walls were built of thick, black stone, and its 5 immense towers were the tallest in the known world. Its great hall was large enough to hold an entire army. But the completion of Harrenhal came at the worst possible moment for Harren the Black. On the day the castle was finished, Aegon Targaryen landed in Westeros with his sister wives, Visenya and Rhaenys, along with their 3 dragons, Balerion the Black Dread, Vhagar, and Meraxes. Aegon began his conquest of the 7 kingdoms, and the Riverlands became one of his early targets. When Aegon's forces reached Harrenhal, Harren the Black refused to surrender. Confident in the strength of his massive stone walls, he believed that his fortress was invincible. He boasted that not even dragonfire could breach the thick walls of Harrenhal. But Aegon knew the true power of his dragons. He mounted Balerion the Black Dread, the largest and most fearsome of his dragons, and flew over the walls of Harrenhal. From the skies above, Aegon unleashed a storm of dragonfire upon the castle. The heat was so intense that the thick stone walls of Harrenhal cracked and melted. The great towers twisted and collapsed, and the vast halls were engulfed in flames. Harren the Black and his sons were burned alive within the castle, and the once great fortress was reduced to a blackened, twisted ruin. The destruction of Harrenhal marked the end of House Hoare and the conquest of the Riverlands by Aegon Targaryen. But the story of Harrenhal did not end with the fall of House Hoare. Despite its ruined state, the castle remained one of the largest and most formidable fortresses in Westeros. It was granted to House Coharies, one of Aegon's loyal supporters, but the castle soon became known as a cursed place. Almost every noble family that held Harrenhal met with misfortune. House Coharies, the first family to hold the castle after House Hoare, fell into decline and disappeared within a few generations. House Harroway, the second family to take possession of Harrenhal, rose to power under King Maegor Targaryen, but was destroyed when Maegor ordered the execution of the entire family. House Towers and House Strong followed, each meeting a tragic end. House Strong, which held Harrenhal during the reign of King Viserys I Targaryen, was destroyed by a mysterious fire that swept through the castle, killing Lord Lionel Strong, Hand of the King, and his son Sir Harwin Strong. Some whispered that the fire was an act of murder, but the true cause was never revealed. House Lothston, which took possession of Harrenhal after House Strong, became known for its dark reputation. Lady Dynel Lothston, known as Mad Dynel, was rumored to have practiced dark magic and tortured her enemies in the dungeons of Harrenhal. Her cruelty and madness led to the fall of House Lothston, and the castle was eventually granted to House Went. House Went became the last noble family to hold Harrenhal before the events of Game of Thrones. During the reign of King Robert Baratheon, Harrenhal was the site of a grand tournament hosted by Lord Walter Went. This tournament attracted many of the most powerful lords and knights of Westeros, including Prince Rhaegar Targaryen, Eddard Stark, Robert Baratheon, Jaime Lannister, and Lyanna Stark. It was at this tournament that Prince Rhaegar crowned Lyanna Stark as the Queen of Love and Beauty, a gesture that sparked the events leading to Robert's rebellion. But even during the tournament, whispers of Harrenhal's curse persisted. Some claimed to have seen ghostly figures wandering the castle's twisted halls, while others spoke of strange sounds that echoed through the blackened towers. The curse of Harrenhal became part of the castle's legend, a story of ambition, pride, and destruction. During the War of the Five Kings, Harrenhal changed hands multiple times. It was held by House Lannister, then by House Stark, and later by House Baelish. Lord Tywin Lannister used the castle as a base of operations during the conflict, and it became the site of brutal atrocities committed by Sir Gregor Clegane, known as the Mountain. The ghostly reputation of Harrenhal continued to grow as rumors of the suffering and death within its walls spread. Arya Stark, while disguised as a servant named Arry, witnessed the horrors of Harrenhal firsthand when she was taken to the castle as a prisoner. It was here that she met Jaqen H'ghar, a mysterious assassin of the Faceless men who helped her escape. But even as the power of the great lords rose and fell, the shadow of the curse of Harrenhal remained. It was a place where ambition led to ruin, where the mighty were brought low, and where the whispers of the past seemed to linger in the air. The idea of the Ghost of Harrenhal is more than just a legend. It is a reflection of the castle's dark history, a history marked by betrayal, murder, and tragedy. The blackened, twisted towers of Harrenhal stand as a reminder of the destructive power of dragonfire and the ambitions of those who sought to make the castle their own. Harrenhal's reputation as a cursed place is not just a story. It is a pattern of misfortune that has followed every family that has tried to claim the great fortress. The Ghost of Harrenhal is not a single spirit, but the lingering memory of all those who have suffered and died within its walls. It is a reminder that even the greatest castles can become tombs, that even the mightiest lords can fall, and that the past is never truly forgotten. Harrenhal remains a vast, crumbling ruin, a castle that is too large to maintain and too cursed to be truly claimed. Its blackened towers and empty halls are a silent witness to the history of Westeros, a place where the shadows of the past continue to haunt the present. The Ghost of Harrenhal is a story of ambition, destruction, and despair. It is a story of a castle that was meant to be a monument to power, but became a symbol of ruin. It is a reminder that even in a world of kings and castles, the legacy of the past can never be escaped. Today, Harrenhal stands as a vast, silent ruin, a place where the echoes of history can still be heard, a castle whose blackened walls are a testament to the dreams and ambitions of those who tried to claim it. The Ghost of Harrenhal is not just a legend. It is a reminder of the fragile nature of power and the lasting consequences of ambition. The prince that was promised. In the ancient world of Westeros, a prophecy echoed through the ages, whispered in the halls of great castles, and sung by the priests of distant lands. It was the prophecy of the prince that was promised, a legendary hero who would be born under a bleeding star and would wield a flaming sword to save the world from darkness. This prophecy originated in the ancient texts of the followers of R'hllor, the Lord of Light, a faith that was deeply rooted in the distant lands of Ashai and the Shadowlands. The prophecy spoke of a savior who would rise during a time of great darkness, a warrior destined to lead the forces of light against the rising tide of the dead. The origins of the prophecy are connected to the story of Azor Ahai, a legendary hero who lived thousands of years before the events of Game of Thrones. According to the ancient tales, Azor Ahai was a warrior who saved the world during a period of darkness known as the Long Night. This was a time when an endless winter descended upon the world, bringing death and despair. Azor Ahai was said to have forged a magical sword known as Lightbringer, a blade that burned with the power of fire. But the creation of Lightbringer required a great sacrifice. After 2 failed attempts, Azor Ahai finally succeeded by plunging the blade into the heart of his beloved wife, Nissa, whose soul merged with the sword, giving it its magical power. With Lightbringer in hand, Azor Ahai led the forces of light against the darkness, saving the world from destruction. The followers of R'hllor believed that the prophecy of the prince that was promised was a continuation of the legend of Azor Ahai. They believed that Azor Ahai would be reborn during a time of darkness and would once again lead the fight against the darkness. In the world of Game of Thrones, this prophecy became a source of hope and fear for those who understood its significance. The Red Priests and Priestesses of R'hllor, such as Melisandre, devoted their lives to seeking out the Chosen One who would fulfill the prophecy. Melisandre, a priestess of the Lord of Light, became convinced that Stannis Baratheon, the brother of King Robert Baratheon, was the prince that was promised. She believed that Stannis was destined to defeat the darkness, and she used her magical powers to support his claim to the Iron Throne. Melisandre's belief in Stannis as the Chosen One led her to commit terrible acts in his name. She convinced Stannis to sacrifice those who opposed him, including his own brother, Renly Baratheon, who was killed by a shadowy creature that Melisandre conjured through her magic. In her desperation to ensure Stannis' victory, she even convinced him to sacrifice his own daughter, Princess Shireen Baratheon, believing that her death would bring victory. But Stannis' campaign ended in failure. His army was defeated, his followers abandoned him, and he was killed in battle. Melisandre's faith in him was shattered, and she began to question the true meaning of the prophecy. But the prophecy of the prince that was promised did not end with Stannis. As the story of Game of Thrones continued, other candidates emerged who were believed to be the Chosen One. Daenerys Targaryen, the last surviving member of House Targaryen, became a symbol of hope for many. Born on Dragonstone during a storm and surviving years of exile, Daenerys possessed dragons, which were seen as a sign of her divine destiny. Her struggle to reclaim the Iron Throne and her desire to bring justice to the world made her a powerful and charismatic figure. Some believed that she was the prince that was promised, reborn to save the world from darkness. Jon Snow, the bastard son of Eddard Stark, was also seen as a potential candidate. Raised in the cold and harsh environment of the North, Jon became a member of the Night's Watch, an ancient order sworn to guard the realm from the dangers beyond the Wall. Jon rose to the position of Lord Commander of the Night's Watch and later became king in the North. But Jon's true heritage was a closely guarded secret. He was not a bastard, but the son of Lyanna Stark and Prince Rhaegar Targaryen, making him a legitimate Targaryen with a claim to the Iron Throne. This revelation led many to believe that Jon Snow was the true prince that was promised. As the threat of the White Walkers grew, Jon Snow and Daenerys Targaryen joined forces to fight the army of the dead. The prophecy of the prince that was promised seemed to reach its climax during the Battle of Winterfell, when the Night King led his undead army against the living. But it was neither Jon Snow nor Daenerys who struck the final blow. Instead, it was Arya Stark who killed the Night King with a Valyrian steel dagger, ending the threat of the White Walkers and bringing an end to the long night. This unexpected turn of events left the prophecy of the prince that was promised in question. The prophecy of the prince that was promised is a reminder of the dangers of prophecy itself. Those who believe in prophecy often interpret it in ways that suit their own desires and ambitions. Melisandre's blind faith in Stannis led to the destruction of his family and his death. The followers of R'hllor, who saw Daenerys as a savior, witnessed her transformation into a tyrant who destroyed King's Landing with dragonfire. Even Jon Snow, who was revealed to be a Targaryen, was ultimately forced to kill Daenerys to prevent her from becoming a tyrant. The prophecy promised a hero who would save the world from darkness, but its true meaning remained unclear. In the world of Game of Thrones, the prince that was promised is a legend that reflects the hopes and fears of those who live in a world where darkness is always a looming threat. It is a story of sacrifice, faith, and the struggle to understand the true nature of destiny. Whether the prophecy was ever truly fulfilled is a question that remains unanswered. Was Azor Ahai reborn in Jon Snow, Daenerys Targaryen, or Arya Stark? Or was the prophecy nothing more than a story told by those who sought to find meaning in a world filled with chaos and conflict? The prince that was promised remains a powerful and enduring legend, a reminder that even in the darkest times, people will always look for a savior, a hero who will lead them to victory. But in the end, the true battle is not against the darkness beyond the wall, but against the darkness within the human heart. Jenny of Oldstones and the Ghostly Dance. In the history of Westeros, there are tales that are whispered beside the fire, stories of kings and queens, of great wars and legendary heroes. But there are also stories of quiet sorrow, stories that are remembered not for their grandeur, but for the haunting echoes they leave behind. One such story is that of Jenny of Oldstones. Her tale is one of love, loss, and the quiet dance of memory that lingers long after the music has faded. Jenny of Oldstones was a woman of humble origins, a peasant who lived in the Riverlands. Her name is remembered because of her relationship with Prince Duncan Targaryen, known as Duncan the Small, the eldest son of King Aegon V Targaryen of House Targaryen. Prince Duncan was a member of the royal family, a prince of the blood who was expected to marry for political advantage, to strengthen the alliances of his family. But Prince Duncan defied these expectations. He met Jenny in the village of Oldstones, a place that was once the seat of House Mud, an ancient family that had ruled the Riverlands in the distant past. Despite her low birth, Duncan fell in love with Jenny, and their love became a story that would be remembered for generations. But love is not always simple, especially for those who are born to rule. Prince Duncan's love for Jenny led to a great scandal in the royal court. He chose to marry her, a commoner with no title or wealth, even though he was already promised to a daughter of House Baratheon, one of the great noble houses of Westeros. His decision to marry Jenny led to a conflict with his father, King Aegon V, who had arranged the marriage with House Baratheon as part of a carefully planned alliance. This conflict became known as the Great Council of 233 AC, a gathering of the great lords of Westeros called by King Aegon V to resolve the matter, but Prince Duncan refused to give up Jenny. He chose love over duty, giving up his place in the line of succession to the Iron Throne in order to marry her. His decision had far-reaching consequences. The alliance with House Baratheon was broken, leading to tensions between the royal family and the Baratheons. It also caused a rift between Prince Duncan and his father, a rift that would never fully heal. Jenny of Oldstones became known as a figure of legend, a woman whose love for a prince led to conflict and sorrow. She lived with Prince Duncan in a simple cottage at Oldstones, a place that had once been a grand castle, but was now a ruin. Her humble origins and her connection to the ruined castle gave her an air of mystery, and her name became a part of the folklore of the Riverlands. But Jenny's story did not end with her marriage to Prince Duncan. She became a figure of legend for another reason: her connection to the mysterious Woods Witch, who was said to be her companion. This Woods Witch was a figure of prophecy, a woman who claimed to have the gift of foresight. It was she who made the prophecy of the prince that was promised, a prophecy that spoke of a legendary hero who would save the world from darkness. The presence of Jenny and the Woods Witch at the Targaryen court caused tension, as many viewed them with suspicion. Some whispered that the witch's prophecies were dangerous, while others believed that she held the key to a great and terrible destiny. The story of Jenny of Oldstones took a darker turn with the tragedy at Summerhall. Summerhall was a Targaryen summer palace located in the Stormlands, a place of beauty and peace that became the site of one of the greatest disasters in the history of House Targaryen. In 259 AC, King Aegon V, who was known for his desire to restore the power of House Targaryen through the hatching of dragon eggs, attempted a magical ritual involving wildfire at Summerhall. But something went terribly wrong. A massive fire engulfed the palace, and many members of the royal family lost their lives in the flames. Among them were King Aegon V, Prince Duncan, and many others. Jenny of Oldstones is also believed to have died in the tragedy, though the exact details of her death are unclear. Some say that she died in the flames, alongside Prince Duncan. Others suggest that she survived, but died of grief soon after. The tragedy at Summerhall marked the end of an era for House Targaryen. It was a moment of loss and sorrow, a moment that shattered the dreams of a family that had once ruled Westeros with the power of dragons. The death of Prince Duncan and Jenny of Oldstones became a part of the legend of Summerhall, a story of love lost in the flames. But Jenny's memory did not fade. She became a figure of legend, a woman whose name was remembered in song. The most famous of these songs is Jenny's Song, a haunting ballad that speaks of Jenny dancing with her ghosts in the halls of Oldstones. The song is a reflection of the sorrow and loss that defined her life, a song that captures the quiet sadness of her story. The lyrics speak of her dancing with ghosts, a reminder that even in death, her memory lives on. Jenny's Song became one of the most famous songs in Westeros, sung by minstrels and remembered by lords and commoners alike. In the story of Game of Thrones, the song is sung by Podrick Payne in the Great Hall of Winterfell on the eve of the Battle of Winterfell, a moment that captures the sense of loss and the weight of history that hangs over the characters. The song is a reminder of the tragic history of Westeros, a history marked by love, loss, and sacrifice. The story of Jenny of Oldstones is more than just a tale of love. It is a story of choices, of the conflict between duty and desire. It is a story of a prince who gave up his place in the line of succession for the love of a peasant girl. It is a story of a woman who lived in a ruined castle, a woman whose memory is preserved in song. It is a story that captures the tension between tradition and passion, between the world of kings and the world of commoners. It is also a story that is connected to the larger history of Westeros through the prophecy of the prince that was promised, a prophecy that would become a central part of the faith of R'hllor, the Lord of Light. The Woods Witch, who was Jenny's companion, is remembered as a prophetess who foresaw the coming of a great hero, a prophecy that would echo through the centuries and influence the actions of many characters in Game of Thrones. Jenny of Oldstones may have been a peasant, but her story is one of the most enduring legends of Westeros. It is a story of love and loss, of prophecy and tragedy. It is a story that has been told and retold for generations, a story that continues to echo through the halls of Westeros. Her name is remembered not because of the wealth or power she possessed, but because of the love she shared and the sorrow she endured. It is a story that reminds us that even the humblest of lives can leave a lasting mark on history. Her ghostly dance continues, a quiet memory that lingers in the songs of the minstrels and in the hearts of those who remember her name. But the story of Jenny of Oldstones does not end with the tragedy of Summerhall. It continues in the whispered songs and the quiet memories of Westeros. In the ruins of Oldstones, where Jenny once lived with Prince Duncan, her name became a legend. Oldstones itself was a place steeped in history, an ancient fortress that had once been the seat of House Mud, an ancient family that had ruled the Riverlands long before the rise of the Targaryens. By the time of Jenny's story, Oldstones was already a ruin, a place where the stones whispered of forgotten kings and lost battles. It was here that Jenny and Duncan made their home, living a simple life far from the politics and intrigues of the royal court. But even in this quiet place, their story was one of sorrow. After the tragedy at Summerhall, the memory of Jenny of Oldstones became intertwined with the prophecy of the prince that was promised. This prophecy, first spoken by the woods witch who had been Jenny's companion, foretold the coming of a legendary hero who would save the world from darkness. The prophecy spoke of a figure born of the line of Aerys II Targaryen and Rhaella Targaryen, and it became a central belief of the faith of R'hllor, the Lord of Light. Melisandre, a Red Priestess of R'hllor, would later become one of the most prominent believers in this prophecy, seeing it as a sign of the struggle between light and darkness. The prophecy became a source of hope for some and a source of conflict for others, a reminder of the shadow of the past that lingered over House Targaryen. But Jenny's own story was remembered not through prophecy but through song. Jenny's song became one of the most famous ballads in Westeros, a song that captured the quiet sorrow of her life. The lyrics speak of Jenny dancing with her ghosts in the halls of Oldstones, a place where the memories of the past are never truly forgotten. It is a song that is sung by minstrels in the great halls of Westeros, a song that has been passed down through generations. It is a song that reminds the people of Westeros of the fleeting nature of life and the enduring power of memory. The song's haunting melody and sorrowful lyrics make it a favorite among the people of the North, where the memory of the past is cherished and where stories of love and loss are never forgotten. Jenny's song is also significant because of its connection to the story of Game of Thrones. It is sung by Podrick Payne in the Great Hall of Winterfell on the eve of the Battle of Winterfell, a moment that captures the sense of loss and the weight of history that hangs over the characters. As Podrick's voice echoes through the hall, the song becomes a reflection of the struggles and sacrifices of the characters who have gathered to face the coming darkness. It is a moment of quiet sorrow, a moment that reminds the characters of all they have lost and all they are fighting to protect. But even as the song speaks of sorrow, it is also a reminder of the strength of memory, a reminder that those who have been lost are never truly forgotten. The legacy of Jenny of Oldstones is one of love and loss, but it is also a story of choice. Prince Duncan's decision to marry Jenny, a peasant girl, was a choice that defied tradition and duty. It was a choice that led to conflict within the royal family, a choice that disrupted the carefully planned alliances of House Targaryen. But it was also a choice that was born of love, a choice that Duncan never regretted. His decision to give up his place in the line of succession for the love of Jenny is a story that has been remembered as a symbol of true love, a love that was strong enough to defy the expectations of the world. It is a story that stands in contrast to the many tales of ambition, betrayal, and power that define the history of Westeros. Jenny of Oldstones is also remembered as a figure of quiet strength. She was a woman of humble origins who became the wife of a prince, a woman who lived in a ruined castle and whose name became a legend. She is remembered not because of wealth or power, but because of the love she shared and the sorrow she endured. Her story is a reminder that even in a world of kings and castles, the quiet stories of love and loss are never forgotten. It is a story that speaks to the enduring power of memory, a story that continues to be told in the songs of minstrels and in the whispered stories of the Riverlands. But the memory of Jenny of Oldstones is also a reminder of the shadow of prophecy that hangs over Westeros. The prophecy of the prince that was promised, spoken by the Wood's witch who was her companion, became a part of the mythology of Westeros. It is a prophecy that has influenced the actions of kings and queens, a prophecy that has been interpreted in many different ways. Some see it as a promise of salvation, while others see it as a warning of darkness to come. The connection between Jenny of Oldstones and this prophecy is a reminder of the tension between love and destiny, between the choices we make and the shadows that follow us. Today, the ruins of Oldstones still stand in the Riverlands, a silent reminder of the ancient history of Westeros. The stones of the ruined castle are overgrown with moss and ivy, but the memory of Jenny of Oldstones endures. Her name is remembered in the songs of minstrels, in the stories told by the people of the Riverlands, and in the quiet whispers of the halls of Winterfell. Jenny's song is still sung, a song that captures the sorrow and beauty of her story. It is a song that reminds the people of Westeros of the quiet dance of memory, a dance that continues even after the music has faded. Jenny of Oldstones may have been a peasant, but her story is one of the most enduring legends of Westeros. It is a story that captures the quiet sorrow of a life lived in the shadow of love and loss, a story that has been told and retold for generations. It is a story that reminds us that even in a world of dragons and kings, the quiet stories of the heart are never truly forgotten. And so, the ghostly dance of Jenny of Oldstones continues, a quiet memory that lingers in the halls of Westeros, a story that will never be lost. The story of Jenny of Oldstones does not merely end with her song or the memory of her love for Prince Duncan. It is a story that has left a quiet but lasting mark on the history of Westeros, a story that has echoed through the centuries in the hearts of those who remember it. Jenny's name is remembered in the Riverlands, where the ruins of Oldstones still stand as a silent witness to the past. Oldstones itself is a place of forgotten history, a ruined castle that was once the seat of House Mud, an ancient family that ruled the Riverlands long before the rise of the Targaryens. By the time of Jenny's story, the castle was already a crumbling ruin, a place where the stones whispered of forgotten kings and lost battles. It was here that Jenny lived with Prince Duncan, choosing a life of quiet simplicity over the grandeur of the royal court. But even in this quiet place, their story became a legend. The memory of Jenny of Oldstones also became intertwined with the prophecy of the prince that was promised, a prophecy that has shaped the history of Westeros in ways both great and small. This prophecy, first spoken by the Woods Witch who had been Jenny's companion, foretold the coming of a legendary hero who would save the world from darkness. The prophecy spoke of a figure born of the line of Aerys II Targaryen and Rhaella Targaryen, and it became a central belief of the faith of R'hllor, the Lord of Light. For those who followed the faith of R'hllor, the prophecy became a promise of salvation, a promise that light would triumph over darkness. It was a prophecy that echoed through the centuries, influencing the actions of kings, queens, and priests alike. Melisandre, a red priestess of R'hllor, became one of the most prominent believers in the prophecy, seeing it as a sign of the struggle between light and darkness. She came to believe that Jon Snow, a member of the Night's Watch and the son of Eddard Stark, was the prince that was promised, a belief that shaped her actions and decisions. But for those who remember Jenny of Oldstones, her story is not a story of prophecy. It is a story of love, loss, and memory. It is a story that has been preserved in song, a song that has been sung for generations. Jenny's song is a quiet ballad, a song that speaks of Jenny dancing with her ghosts in the halls of Oldstones. The lyrics of the song capture the quiet sorrow of her life, a life marked by love and loss, a life that ended in the tragedy of Summerhall. But even in death, her memory lives on. The song is a reminder that even the humblest of lives can leave a lasting mark on history. It is a reminder that love is not bound by wealth or power, that even a peasant girl can capture the heart of a prince. It is a reminder that even in a world of kings and castles, the quiet stories of the heart are never truly forgotten. Jenny of Oldstones is remembered not because of the wealth or power she possessed, but because of the love she shared and the sorrow she endured. Her story is a story of a woman who chose love over fear, a woman who lived in a ruined castle, but whose memory has become a part of the history of Westeros. Her name is whispered in the songs of minstrels, her story is told in the halls of Winterfell, and her memory is preserved in the ruins of Oldstones. But her story is also a reminder of the tragedy of Summerhall, a tragedy that claimed the lives of many members of House Targaryen, including King Aegon V and Prince Duncan. It is a reminder of the dangers of ambition and the terrible cost of dreams. King Aegon V, who sought to restore the power of House Targaryen through the hatching of dragon eggs, lost everything in the flames of Summerhall. His dream became a nightmare, a moment of loss and sorrow that shattered his family and weakened his house. The tragedy of Summerhall marked the end of an era for House Targaryen. It was a moment that cast a shadow over the family, a moment that was remembered with sorrow and regret. It was a moment that became part of the legend of Jenny of Oldstones, a moment that added a final note of sadness to her story. But even as the Targaryen dynasty was weakened, the memory of Jenny of Oldstones endured. Her name became a part of the history of the Riverlands, a part of the folklore of Westeros. Her story is a story that has been told and retold for generations, a story that has become a part of the culture and identity of the people of Westeros. Today, the ruins of Oldstones still stand in the Riverlands, a silent reminder of the ancient history of Westeros. The stones of the ruined castle are overgrown with moss and ivy, but the memory of Jenny of Oldstones endures. Her name is remembered in the songs of minstrels, in the stories told by the people of the Riverlands, and in the quiet whispers of the halls of Winterfell. Her song is still sung, a song that captures the sorrow and beauty of her story. It is a song that reminds the people of Westeros of the quiet dance of memory, a dance that continues even after the music has faded. The legacy of Jenny of Oldstones is one of quiet strength and quiet sorrow. It is a legacy that has been preserved in song, a legacy that has been remembered not because of great battles or grand conquests, but because of the quiet story of a woman who loved and was loved. It is a story that has been told for generations, a story that continues to echo through the halls of Westeros. It is a story that reminds us that even in a world of dragons and kings, the quiet stories of the heart are never truly forgotten. Jenny of Oldstones may have been a peasant, but her name has become a part of the history of Westeros. Her story is a story of love and loss, of prophecy and tragedy. It is a story that has been remembered in song, a story that has been whispered in the quiet halls of ruined castles and in the great halls of kings. It is a story that will never be lost. The ghostly dance of Jenny of Oldstones continues, a quiet memory that lingers in the songs of the minstrels, a story that will never fade. The last dragon's dying flame. In the history of Westeros, dragons were once the most powerful creature known to mankind. They were not legends or mythical beasts, but living, fire-breathing reptiles, massive in size and capable of bringing destruction with a single breath. The dragons of Westeros were not wild creatures. They were the weapons of House Targaryen, a noble family descended from the ancient Valyrian freehold. The Valyrians were dragon lords, a race of powerful sorcerers who had mastered the art of taming and riding dragons. For centuries, the Valyrians used their dragons to conquer and dominate the lands of Essos, building an empire that stretched from the Shadowlands in the east to the free cities in the west. But the Valyrian freehold came to a sudden and catastrophic end in the year 102 BC. Known as the Doom of Valyria, this disaster was a series of massive volcanic eruptions that destroyed the Valyrian peninsula, reducing the proud cities of Valyria to ash and molten rock. The great dragon lords of Valyria were annihilated in an instant, their dragons consumed by fire and darkness. Only one family of dragon lords survived the Doom House Targaryen. They had settled on the island of Dragonstone, far to the west, long before the Doom, having been warned of the coming disaster by a prophetic dream seen by Daenerys Targaryen, known as Daenerys the Dreamer. House Targaryen became the last surviving family of dragon lords in the known world, possessing a handful of dragons that had escaped the Doom. It was from Dragonstone that Aegon Thirst Targaryen, known as Aegon the Conqueror, launched his conquest of Westeros in the year 2 BC. Aegon rode the greatest of the Targaryen dragons, Balerion the Black Dread, a massive beast with scales as black as coal and wings that could blot out the sun. Aegon was joined by his sisters, Visenya and Rhaenys, who rode their own dragons, Vhagar and Meraxes. With these three dragons, Aegon and his sisters burned the castles of their enemies, shattered armies, and forced the great lords of Westeros to bend the knee. The conquest of Westeros marked the beginning of the Targaryen dynasty, a line of dragon lords who would rule the Seven Kingdoms for nearly 3 centuries. The Targaryen kings maintained their power through their dragons, which were both symbols of their divine right to rule and powerful weapons of war. But the story of the Targaryen dragons is not just a tale of conquest. It is also a story of decline. Over the centuries, the Targaryen dragons became smaller and weaker. This decline became most evident during the Targaryen Civil War, known as the Dance of the Dragons, which began in the year 129 AC. The Dance of the Dragons was a brutal and bloody conflict between two rival factions of House Targaryen, each claiming the Iron Throne. Princess Rhaenyra Targaryen, the daughter of King Viserys I, claimed the throne as his rightful heir, while her half-brother Aegon II challenged her claim. Both factions possessed dragons, and the war quickly became a battle of dragon against dragon. Great beasts that once ruled the skies were reduced to tearing each other apart in vicious aerial duels. Many of the greatest dragons of House Targaryen were killed in the conflict, including Caraxes, the Bloodworm, Vhagar, the ancient she-dragon who had once been ridden by Visenya, and Sunfire, the golden dragon of Aegon II. By the end of the Dance of the Dragons, the Targaryen dragon population was devastated. The survivors were not the mighty beasts of old. They were smaller, weaker, and sickly. Their strength and size diminished with each generation. Maesters of the Citadel, the scholars and healers of Westeros, debated the cause of this decline. Some believed that the Targaryens had weakened their dragons by keeping them in captivity within the Dragon Pit of King's Landing, a massive dome-like structure built to house the royal dragons. Others believed that the dragons were a magical species whose power was fading from the world. The death of the last true Targaryen dragon occurred during the reign of King Aegon III, known as Aegon the Dragonbane. Aegon III had witnessed the horrors of the Dance of the Dragons as a child. He had seen his mother Rhaenyra burned alive by a dragon, and he developed a deep hatred of dragons as a result. Although he did not personally kill the dragons, his reign became associated with their decline and extinction. The last Targaryen dragon was a frail, sickly creature, no larger than a horse. When it died, the Targaryens lost the source of their greatest power, and their dynasty was forever changed. Without dragons, the Targaryens became vulnerable. They were no longer the all-powerful dragon lords of old, but merely another noble family struggling to maintain control over the Seven Kingdoms. The Iron Throne, once a symbol of Targaryen dominance, became a seat of endless conflict as rival claimants and rebellious lords sought to seize it. The Targaryens were forced to rely on political marriages, alliances, and military force to maintain their rule. The skulls of the dead dragons were displayed in the throne room of the Red Keep, silent and empty-eyed reminders of the family's lost glory. But the dream of the Targaryen dragons was never entirely forgotten. Even after the death of the last dragon, the Targaryens continued to keep dragon eggs as family treasures. These eggs were thought to be petrified, mere relics of the past. Kings and queens attempted to hatch new dragons through magical rituals, but all of these attempts ended in failure. The dragons were gone, and with them, the Targaryens' greatest advantage. Yet the legend of the dragons persisted, a reminder of the power that House Targaryen had once wielded and a symbol of the divine right that they claimed to rule. But the story of the Targaryen dragons was not yet over. Centuries later, a new generation of dragons would be born, and the world of Westeros would once again tremble beneath their wings. Centuries passed, and the Targaryen dynasty continued to rule Westeros. But without dragons, their power was no longer absolute. Kings came and went, some wise and just, others cruel and mad. The Iron Throne became a prize fought over by ambitious lords, and the Targaryens relied on alliances, political marriages, and military might rather than the overwhelming power of dragons. The memory of the great Targaryen dragons faded into legend. The skulls of the dead dragons remained in the throne room of the Red Keep, silent reminders of a lost era. But these were only bones, cold, empty, and powerless. Yet the dream of dragons was never entirely abandoned. Even in the darkest days of Targaryen rule, the Dragon Lords continued to cherish ancient dragon eggs as family treasures. These eggs were believed to be petrified, their magical life force gone. But they were still symbols of the Targaryens' lost glory, and they were passed down through the generations, kept safe in the vaults of the Red Keep, or given as gifts to favored nobles. Kings and queens attempted to hatch these eggs through magical rituals, but none succeeded. Some of the most desperate Targaryen rulers turned to alchemists, fire mages, and sorcerers, seeking forbidden knowledge to revive the dragons. All these attempts ended in failure. King Aegon IV, known as Aegon the Unworthy, attempted to use dragon eggs as bribes to secure the loyalty of his supporters, but the eggs remained cold and lifeless. His son, King Daeron II, married a Dornish princess named Mirria Martell, hoping to secure peace and stability for the realm. But the dream of dragons continued to haunt the Targaryens. Even King Aerys II, the Mad King, who descended into paranoia and madness, dreamed of restoring the dragons. He became obsessed with wildfire, a deadly and volatile substance that could burn even stone. In his madness, Aerys saw wildfire as a substitute for dragonfire, believing that it would give him the power of his ancestors. But his obsession with wildfire led only to his downfall and the destruction of his dynasty. The Targaryen dynasty came to an end in the year 283 AC with Robert's Rebellion, a brutal civil war that saw the Targaryen family overthrown. King Aerys II was killed by Sir Jaime Lannister, the Kingslayer, while his son, Prince Rhaegar Targaryen, was defeated and killed by Robert Baratheon at the Battle of the Trident. King's Landing was sacked, and Queen Rhaella Targaryen fled to Dragonstone, where she gave birth to her last surviving child, Daenerys Targaryen. But even as the Targaryen dynasty crumbled, the dream of dragons survived. Daenerys and her brother Viserys were taken into exile, living as beggars in the free cities of Essos, far from the Iron Throne that had once been their birthright. It was in the distant city of Pentos that the story of the Targaryen dragons was reborn. Daenerys Targaryen, a young girl with silver gold hair and violet eyes, married Khal Drogo, a powerful Dothraki warlord, in a political alliance arranged by her brother Viserys. As a wedding gift, she received 3 dragon eggs from Illyrio Mopatis, a wealthy merchant and ally of the Targaryens. These eggs were thought to be ancient and petrified, beautiful but lifeless. But Daenerys cherished them, keeping them close even as she traveled across the vast Dothraki Sea with her new husband. But Daenerys' life was marked by tragedy. Her brother Viserys, consumed by his own ambition and madness, was killed by Khal Drogo's men after threatening his sister. Later, Drogo himself was gravely wounded and fell into a coma. In a desperate attempt to save him, Daenerys sought the help of a witch named Mirri Maz Dur, but the witch's magic only brought death and betrayal. Drogo became a living corpse, and Daenerys was left alone, a widow among a hostile people. As her world fell apart, Daenerys walked into Drogo's funeral pyre, carrying the 3 dragon eggs with her. When the flames died down, Daenerys emerged unharmed, and from the ashes of the pyre came a miracle. The 3 dragon eggs had hatched. From the flames rose 3 living dragons, creatures that had not been seen in Westeros for more than a century. Daenerys became known as the Mother of Dragons, and her 3 dragons Drogon, named after her late husband Khal Drogo, Rhaegal, named after her brother Rhaegar, and Viserion, named after her brother Viserys, became the living symbols of her claim to the Iron Throne. For the first time in generations, House Targaryen possessed the power of dragons once again. The dragons grew rapidly, their strength and size increasing with each passing year. They became both weapons and companions to Daenerys as she traveled across the lands of Essos. She used them to conquer cities such as Astapor, where she freed the unsullied slave soldiers, and Meereen, where she sought to establish herself as a just and merciful ruler. But the dragons were not merely tools. They were living creatures with their own instincts, and they were not always under Daenerys' control. Drogon, the largest and most aggressive of the 3, became a fearsome presence, burning livestock and even killing a young girl in Meereen. Daenerys' dragons became a symbol of her power, but they were also a source of fear. As they grew larger, Daenerys struggled to control them, eventually imprisoning Rhaegal and Viserion in the dungeons of Meereen. Drogon escaped and became a wild beast, hunting in the Great Plains of Essos. But even in captivity, the dragons remained a symbol of Daenerys' divine right to rule. When she rode Drogon into battle, her enemies trembled, and her followers saw her as a queen blessed by the gods. But the story of the Targaryen dragons was not without tragedy. During the final season of Game of Thrones, Daenerys led her dragons and her armies to Westeros, determined to reclaim the Iron Throne. But her dream of becoming queen ended in blood and fire. Rhaegal was killed by a massive scorpion bolt fired by Euron Greyjoy's fleet, a sudden and brutal death that left Daenerys devastated. Later, Viserion, who had been killed and raised as an undead dragon by the Night King, was destroyed in the Battle of Winterfell. Only Drogon survived, the last living dragon of House Targaryen. Daenerys' conquest of King's Landing became a massacre as she unleashed Drogon's fire upon the city, reducing it to ashes. Her quest for the Iron Throne ended in betrayal and death. Jon Snow, her lover and nephew, killed her in the throne room of the Red Keep to prevent her from becoming a tyrant. After her death, Drogon carried her body away, disappearing into the distant east, leaving Westeros forever. Drogon, the last living dragon, became a legend, a symbol of the Targaryen dream that had turned to ash. The story of the Targaryen dragons, which had begun with the fiery conquest of Aegon the Conqueror, ended with the lonely flight of Drogon into the unknown. The last dragon's dying flame was not just the end of a species, but the end of a dynasty, a story of power gained and lost, of dreams born in fire and consumed by it. The story of the Targaryen dragons did not truly end with the death of Daenerys or the departure of Drogon. Even as the last living dragon disappeared into the unknown, the legacy of the Targaryen dragons continued to cast a shadow over Westeros. The dragons had been more than mere beasts. They were symbols of power, weapons of conquest, and embodiments of House Targaryen's divine right to rule. but they were also a reminder of the fragility of power and the danger of unchecked ambition. The Targaryen dynasty, which had risen to greatness on the wings of dragons, had fallen because of the same destructive force that had once been its greatest strength. Drogon's fate remained a mystery. After he carried Daenerys's body away from King's Landing, he was last seen flying east toward the lands of Essos. Some believed that he would return to Valyria, the ancient homeland of the Dragonlords, a land of smoking ruins and molten rock. Others speculated that he might find refuge in the Shadowlands beyond Ashai, a distant and mysterious region where the blood magic of old Valyria was said to have originated. In Westeros, the name of Drogon became a legend, a tale of the last living dragon who vanished beyond the horizon, carrying the body of the last Targaryen queen. But the story of the Targaryen dragons left behind more than just legends. It left a legacy of blood, fire, and conquest. The Iron Throne, which had been forged by Aegon the Conqueror with dragonfire, remained a symbol of power and ambition. Yet the throne itself became a source of endless conflict, a seat claimed by kings and queens who fought and died for the right to sit upon it. In the final years of the Game of Thrones series, the Iron Throne was destroyed by Drogon himself, melted by his fire in a final act of grief and rage after the death of Daenerys. The throne that had been created by dragonfire was ultimately destroyed by it. The skulls of the dead dragons, once displayed in the throne room of the Red Keep, were shattered and buried in the ruins of King's Landing. The stories of the great dragons Balerion the Black Dread, Vhagar, Meraxes, Caraxes, and others became tales told by bards and written in the pages of ancient chronicles. The Targaryens were remembered as dragonlords, but also as a dynasty cursed by madness, betrayal, and bloodshed. The story of the Targaryen dragons became a story of power lost, a reminder that even the greatest forces in the world are not immune to decline. Yet the dream of dragons was never truly forgotten. In the distant lands of Essos, the followers of R'hllor, the Lord of Light, continued to speak of the prophecy of the prince that was promised, a savior who would rise to save the world from darkness. This prophecy was closely tied to the legend of Azor Ahai, a mythical hero who wielded a flaming sword and saved the world during the long night. To the followers of R'hllor, the dragons of House Targaryen were symbols of this prophecy, creatures of fire born to fight against the darkness. Even after the death of Daenerys and the disappearance of Drogon, the belief in the prophecy persisted. There were also rumors that other dragon eggs might still exist, hidden in the ruins of Valyria, lost in the shadowed halls of ancient castles, or kept as secret treasures by wealthy merchants in the free cities. In the distant city of Volantis, the Black Walls still stood, a fortress built by the descendants of the ancient Valyrian dragonlords. The rulers of Volantis continued to claim descent from the Valyrian freehold, and they maintained their own faith in the power of the dragonlords. Some believed that Volantis possessed hidden dragon eggs, kept in secret vaults, waiting for the day when the blood of the dragon would rise again. But in Westeros, the age of dragons was over. The kingdoms of Westeros were ruled by a new order, one that had been forged in the fires of war and shaped by the ambitions of great houses. The Starks of Winterfell, the Baratheons of Storm's End, the Lannisters of Casterly Rock, these were the houses that now held power. The memory of the Targaryen dragons became a legend, a story of fire and blood that seemed distant and unreal to the people of the realm. Yet even in the quiet corners of Westeros, where the small folk tended their fields and the lords feasted in their great halls, the story of the Targaryen dragons was not forgotten. It was told in whispered tales by old men who remembered the sight of Drogon's shadow passing over the fields. It was sung by bards who spoke of the mother of dragons and her quest for the Iron Throne. It was written in the pages of ancient books, studied by maesters in the Citadel, who debated the causes of the dragon's decline and the mysteries of their magic. The last dragon's dying flame is not just a story of a species that perished. It is a story of a family that rose to greatness through fire and was consumed by it. It is a story of dreams that turned to ash, of a legacy that brought both glory and ruin. The Targaryen dragons were not merely creatures of legend. They were living symbols of power, ambition, and the dangers of absolute authority. Their fire brought light to the world, but it also brought destruction. In the end, the death of the last dragon and the fall of House Targaryen serve as a reminder that even the most powerful empires can crumble, that even the mightiest creatures can die. But it is also a reminder that legends never truly die. The memory of the Targaryen dragons lives on in the stories told around campfires, in the songs sung by bards, and in the dreams of those who still look to the sky, wondering if one day the shadow of a dragon will once again darken the world. The last dragon's dying flame is not just the end of a story. It is a part of the history of Westeros, a chapter in the long and bloody tale of fire and blood. And as long as men remember the name of House Targaryen, they will remember the dragons, the creatures of fire, who once ruled the skies, and whose dying flame will never be forgotten.